We have something really special to share with you today.
Biopics are one of the most despised movie genres. Audience hatred of the biopic is the result of decades of Oscar bait trash, cynical cash grabs, formulaic scripts, infamous performances, historical abominations, and political propaganda. And worst of all, biopics won't go away. Every year, Hollywood excretes a fresh load of unasked for biopics, and they're usually terrible. But Hollywood keeps making them because they're cheap, have built-in audience recognition, and win film awards. Yes, there are good biopics, but these rare gems are, and always have been, a tiny fraction of the genre output. For every A Complete Unknown, there are a dozen Back to Blacks. For every Michael Collins, there are many Mandela Long Walk to Freedoms. In this video, we will be examining the worst biopics of the past 15 years, beginning with... The clip that opened this video is from the 2013 movie Jobs. This abomination stars Ashton Kutcher as Steve Jobs.
Don't you dare blame this on me.
I'm not, Ashton. You were... well, we'll get to that. Jobs was greenlit immediately after Steve Jobs took medical leave from Apple. Jobs' failing health was a major news item at the time, and the producers wanted to make sure that Jobs came out while Steve Jobs was dying. They might even hit the jackpot. Steve Jobs dies right before the movie hits theaters. You know the producers of Jobs were praying to Lucifer that Steve Jobs would live long enough to die the month before release. But their prayers were not answered. The stupid bastard went and died on them ahead of schedule, almost 4 quarters ahead of the scheduled product launch. Way to blow the marketing, Steve! I've chosen to begin my examination of the worst biopics of the past 15 years with Jobs because the movie exemplifies all of the worst tendencies of the genre. Specifically, there are 8 major problems with Jobs that will come up again and again in this video as we examine other awful biopics. 1. The greatest hits format. That is, the structuring of a movie around the best known events and anecdotes of the subject's life. 2. A horrible lead performance that turns the subject into a caricature. Except Zoe Saldana as Nina Simone. You were incredible in that role, weren't you, Zoe? No. 3. Genre tropes. Jobs might be the tropiest movie I have ever seen. To name a few of the tropes it spews out, starting at the end, then going back to the start. Inspiring speeches accompanied by inspiring music. Montages. The "You changed, man" moment. Hilariously bad aging makeup. A botched attempt at a perfect cadence ending.
What was that?
4. Lack of historical context. Events depicted are not contextualized, so the audience will often have no idea why they should care about what is happening on screen. 5. Poor research. This leads to glaring historical inaccuracies.
The portrayal in the clip was a little absurd. I never wore a tie or looked like a professional. And in that scene, I kind of looked like a real professional.
What would Steve Jobs think of his portrayal?
I think he would have been a little offended and embarrassed by it, just like myself. I think Steve would say, "Oh, that was, a little too phony."
6. Cheesy and unnecessary dramatization. 7. Cheesy needle drops intended to communicate what era the movie is depicting. 8. Cynical movie production. Almost all biopics are awards bait or cash grabs or both. Jobs is guilty of all of these crimes to an extreme degree. Jobs begins with the start at the end cliche, which you will be seeing a lot of in this video. The first scene shows Steve unveiling the iPod to the world. So why is this opening scene so wrong? Let's assume the viewer doesn't know much about Steve Jobs or Apple products. All that viewer will see is some guy wandering around a stage telling an audience of strangely spellbound interns.
Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
In the good Steve Jobs movie, Danny Boyle's Steve Jobs, there are no product presentations. The importance of the iPod is communicated by how meaningful it will be for one person, Steve's daughter. Here, the iPod feels less like a generic consumer product and more like an important personal device. But Jobs divests the iPod of its cultural impact and its personality and makes it a bland piece of consumer plastic, the kind of slop product junk that Apple has become infamous for. After the end, the movie goes back to the start. When Steve was a bright-eyed college kid, within 3 minutes, Steve has gone barefoot, justified dropping out of college, picked up some hippie girl, cheated on his girlfriend, done LSD, and bemoaned being abandoned by his parents.
Who has a baby and then just throws it away like it's nothing?
This is caricaturization. The writer has a barely researched straw man of Steve Jobs in his head.
I didn't know Steve Jobs personally. I'd never met him, but I feel like I knew him.
And he's ticking off boxes to prop up this straw man, inspiring leader whose very movement is accompanied by inspiring music. Hippie, oddball, dropout, free lover, romantic, orphan. All boxes ticked off within the first few minutes because the writer has no concept of pacing or allowing the character to emerge organically from the narrative. The obscene level of amateurism in the writing is to be expected, as the writer for this movie, Matt Whiteley, has a grand total of 1 credit on IMDb, Jobs. He had never written anything before writing the script for this movie, and by the grace of God has not written anything since. I do not exaggerate when I say that one has a difficult task in fully understanding just how shit Jobs' opening sequence is.
It's beyond understanding.
Hey, it's that guy. I love it when a that guy actor pops up in a movie. You don't know what he's called, you don't know what you saw him in, but you know he's that guy and you like him. Oh, I remember now, he was in Mars Attacks.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes.
Jobs is rapid-fire dog shit. As I write this, I am 11 minutes and 44 seconds in. I'm working on my draft notes, and I'm having to stop the movie every minute to make note of some egregious error. Before the movie even hits the 10-minute mark, there's a young Steve's greatest hits montage. He attends calligraphy class, computing class, has sensual sex, listens to some McGuru spout pop philosophy, the kind of brain-dead, thought-terminating slop boomers ate up in the 70s.
Life is but a journey.
Having a montage this early in a movie is always wrong. Why is Steve doing any of this stuff? What relevance do these activities have to his story? Who is this guy? If you were to ask that question to the filmmakers at this point in the movie, they would respond, he's Steve Jobs. Okay, who the fuck is Steve Jobs? Why am I being asked to care about this college kid's trip to India? The filmmakers assume the audience knows who this man is, therefore context and motivation is not required for a viewer to invest in his journey. Jobs' first montage behaves like the payoff to a series of setups, but there is no setup. The classic OG montage, Rocky's training montage, was the payoff of redemption, romance, and character growth plot elements that were all set up meticulously over the course of the 1 hour and 15 minutes of runtime that preceded the montage. The Rocky montage was earned, and it fucking crushed. The Jobs 10-minute mark montage was not earned. It was defecated. The first scene after the montage presents another example of an unearned payoff. Steve is working at Atari. 1 minute into the Atari scene, this exchange is presented to the audience.
Steve, you're good. You're damn good. But you're an asshole.
A character being publicly dressed down for being an asshole must be preceded by significant build-up. Here is this exact dramatic beat done right.
Because you had the talent to become a good fighter, and instead of that, you became a leg breaker, some cheap second-rate loan shark.
It's a living?
It's a waste of life.
Prior to this exchange, the audience has seen Rocky collect for a loan shark. It is implied that Rocky has caused serious bodily harm to debtors in the past. His disappointment in himself is also palpable by this stage in the movie. Rocky being publicly chastised by Mickey is cathartic because Mickey is right. Rocky is a bum who is wasting his life and talent as a hired thug. Jobs doesn't even get 1 minute into Steve's stint at Atari before his public dressing down, and the research in this movie is lazy high school student bad.
No, it's still black and white. People want color.
It can't do color.
The Atari scene is taking place in 1976. The first color video game, Color Gotcha, was released in 1973. The developer of that game was Atari.
It can't do color.
And behind Steve in this frame, attached to the wall, is a poster of Color Gotcha. I will give Jobs credit in that the filmmakers do an excellent job of communicating that Steve Jobs cannot work for other people. This is a guy who needs his independence.
I just can't work for other people. I need my independence.
25 minutes in, there's a bizarre scene in which Steve drives past his presumably ex-girlfriend's house, gazes mournfully at her, meets her eye, and drives on. The scene is jarring because we don't even know this girl's name. She appeared briefly in 2 earlier scenes and spoke 1 brief line. There is no breakup scene between her and Steve, and he never even mentions her. How can the audience be expected to have any emotional investment in Steve's feelings about this random woman from 15 minutes ago? Steve mourning his ex is yet another payoff which has no setup. The filmmakers may have cut an early romantic subplot from the final edit, but decided to leave this scene in for some unfathomable purpose. Jobs spends more time on the origin of the Apple brand naming in a driving scene with Steve and Steve Wozniak than on showing that Steve Jobs is difficult to work with. The filmmakers favor cheap anecdote over meaningful characterization. Cartoonish tactics are employed to present Steve as a sales whiz. Generic salesman tells Steve he's interested in retailing the Apple One. He offers $400 per machine, paid upon delivery, but Steve negotiates.
We're not negotiating.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
A few seconds later, generic salesman agrees to $500 per machine. Upon the delivery of the Apple One, generic complains that this so-called computer only consists of a circuit board. He can't sell a circuit board to consumers. He needs monitors and keyboards. Steve tells him he can package the boards with his own shit. Generic salesman agrees, and Steve whispers something cryptically about the Apple II. In another example of amateur writing, Steve has an argument with that guy, and as soon as the argument is over, the director tells generic investor to enter stage left. So generic investor drives into the plot and helps take Apple to the next level. Generic investor dresses like a businessman and speaks in cliches.
I've been looking for something to really sink my teeth into.
If you asked a high schooler to write a scene between an ambitious young CEO of a startup and an investor, you would end up with something like this scene. The dialogue is loaded with tropey lines and cliched dramatic beats that you've seen a million times before.
I think we should start with around 90 grand, see where that takes us.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
So in the next scene, we find out that Steve's girlfriend is pregnant.
I'm pregnant.
What do you mean? His girlfriend's pregnant. What fucking girlfriend? The one whose name we don't know? The one who spoke 1 line, then disappeared from the movie 35 minutes ago? The one whose house he drove past as he presumably mourned their breakup? What movie am I watching here? 5 seconds ago, this was a rags to riches tech startup story. Now it's a soap opera. Cheesy afternoon TV dialogue included.
Steve, are you crazy? You cannot put this all on me.
You can't do this to me right now.
As cliche-ridden and out of place as this scene is, I will give the filmmakers credit for the brilliant method they use to communicate that Steve Jobs' personality has changed over time.
He changed.
Having filled in the domestic troubles section of this colour-by-numbers biopic, the movie can now progress to the part where our ambitious young upstart wows the world. In order to wow the world, Steve needs an audience, so the script delivers a large audience to his booth at some computer convention, and he makes an inspiring speech accompanied by inspiring music. 5 seconds ago, this guy was working out of his garage. Now, I know generic businessman made an investment in Apple, but that doesn't automatically make people give a shit. Why would a crowd of well over 100 people gather around the booth of this pissant Intel wannabe? At this stage, Apple has hawked a few Apple Ones. That's it. There is no reason for anyone to be excited about this company. Okay, this isn't 2015 when a company can reach a valuation of $10 billion without selling a single unit of product. But maybe the huge crowd gathered around the Apple booth because they knew something big was about to happen when Steve walked in accompanied by inspiring music. So Steve makes a speech to introduce his product, and for some bizarre reason, everyone starts applauding.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next products.
Why are you clapping? Some guy at a convention introduced his company's product. That's it. This does not merit applause. So the movie jump cuts to 1980 and Apple are a big, successful company now. I don't know how or why they are a successful company because the movie didn't tell me. Anyway, the purpose of this scene is to show that Steve is mean and difficult to work with. The movie informs the viewer that Apple are working on the Lisa, which won't mean anything to 99% of viewers, and the movie makes no attempt to explain it. So Steve is getting very angry about a product not meeting his expectations, but the viewer has no idea what the product is, what its function is, or how important it is. This could be a flagship product, or it could be a disposable prototype. The mistake the screenwriter makes here is assuming viewer knowledge. This is a common amateur writing mistake, one which I saw many times as a writing teacher. The film simply expects the viewer to know what the Lisa is, why its success is important for Apple, and what the consequences of its failure are. That is esoteric information that must be communicated clearly for a viewer to invest in this scene, and the film communicates none of this information. So Steve has a public crash out because this is a biopic, and in biopics the main character has a public crash out.
I said everybody out! I already fired you!
A public crash out always signals personal drama in a biopic. So Steve has personal drama related to that girl who materialized in his kitchen saying that he got her pregnant. In the next scene, Steve has a power lunch to talk business, during which he makes a major decision.
Daniel gets nothing.
Nothing.
Seeing Steve make this major decision was both shocking and dramatic, but the scene did leave me with one burning question. Who the fuck is Daniel?
Mike told me about what happened with Bill and Dan.
Wow, that's really something, was. Just one question. Who is Mike, Bill and Dan? So Apple launched their IPO to great success. The movie offers no explanation for why the IPO was successful, what products the IPO was backed with, what the financial consequences of a failed IPO launch would have been, or the kind of pressure that Steve and the rest of the Apple leadership were under prior to the launch. Like everything else in the movie, the IPO launch is just a thing that happens because it needs to happen so that the next thing can happen. Office politics hasn't been ticked off the biopic checklist yet, so next up, office politics. Stock business exec goes up against generic investor, and the conversation is basically an amalgam of every corporate politics business cliche in movies. He's a madman. He has to be stopped. He did a thing we didn't like. It's right here on page 1 of the Generic Times. He's gone too far this time, generic investor. You can't do this, stock business exec. I've talked to the board and I'm afraid they're unanimous, generic businessman. Steve is off the Lisa project. No, the movie still has not explained what the Lisa project is. Obviously it's a computer, but the viewer has no idea what differentiates a Lisa computer from any other commercially available contemporary computer, or what innovations it offers. Jobs doesn't even explain what the Apple II is, or the impact that it had. Steve gets put in charge of the Macintosh team and makes another inspiring speech accompanied by inspiring music.
It's gotta work like an appliance.
A mark of bad acting in biopics is the actor exaggerating some idiosyncratic trait of the person being portrayed. This is Rami Malek's entire performance in Bohemian Rhapsody, because he places an emphasis on every second word, darling.
I'm a performer, darling, not a Swiss train conductor.
Ashton Kutcher seems to have picked up on Steve Jobs' habit of speaking in strongly whispered staccato phrases filled with pregnant pauses.
And we don't stop innovating.
Another problem with Kutcher's performance is that he speaks his lines like he's in a commercial.
We can't look at the competition and say we're going to do it better.
I understand that the dog shit dialogue invites this kind of delivery, but Steve Wozniak's dialogue is just as atrocious, and the actor still manages to sound like a real person when he's delivering his lines. Not that it matters because I checked out of this movie an hour ago, but I have no idea who this bearded man is, or why he and Steve are so confrontational with one another. But apparently I'm supposed to care when Bearded Man is fired a few scenes later. Bearded Man is an incarnation of a common biopic trope I discovered over the course of researching this video. I have named this trope Philistine Moneyberg. Phil Moneyberg is a character whose job is to fail to comprehend the genius of the movie's hero, thus making the hero look better by comparison.
You're not a space alien, you're from Bromley, man.
Oh yes, I am.
So I'm watching the movie and working on this script while my wife does laundry in the next room, and when this line was spoken, we both burst out laughing.
And in your life, you only get to do so many things. And right now,
we've chosen to do this.
According to Apple's Wikipedia page, the hiring of John Scully was a major decision in the company's history, so that has to be in the movie. So we get the Scully hiring sequence. It is now 1984. We know this because Steve says,
It is now 1984.
Then he makes an inspiring speech accompanied by inspiring music. So he gets a standing ovation. I'm going to take a moment to give some unironic praise to Jobs. During a scene in which Steve is working on the floor, Boots of Spanish Leather is playing in the background. Usually when a Dylan song is included in a movie soundtrack, it's some well-worn cliche like Blowing in the Wind or Mr. Tambourine Man. So fair play to the movie for choosing a lesser-known Dylan masterpiece. Unfortunately, the scene itself is pure cliche. So cliche, in fact, that The Simpsons parodied this scene in the season 3 episode The Otto Show, which was released in 1992, 21 years before Jobs.
But you've got to go on.
Slag off.
You've changed, man. It used to be about the music.
I said slag off.
Steve Wozniak tells Steve that he's leaving Apple. We know that Woz leaving upsets Steve because the filmmakers included this subtle hint for us. The greatest hits biopic structure is always wrong. But Jobs manages to be both wrong and bizarre. The movie has a brief montage which spends 42 seconds on 1992, briefly touching on Steve's company next, before jumping to 1996. The rest of the movie is just stuff happens. All the same mistakes keep getting repeated. Steve hears an inspiring speech accompanied by inspiring music from a character who just showed up. Newton's failure is mentioned, but the movie doesn't explain who this Newton guy is. Steve goes back to Apple and tells random Apple team to stop working on what they're working on, but the movie doesn't communicate why Steve wants them to stop working on that product, or what was wrong with that product, or what that product even was. The movie also continues to break basic writing principles. As a rule, a writer should avoid presenting new information in the concluding passages of a piece of writing, except as a cliffhanger. A screenwriter should not bring significant new characters into the movie in the final act. Jobs introduces several significant characters in its final act. The movie already suffers from cast bloat. Lisa, Dan, Mike, Steve, the other Steve, Phil Moneyberg, Scully, the various stock characters, that guy. What happened to him, by the way? He just disappeared from the movie. And the new characters just keep coming. Steve's wife, I don't even know if this is his ex-girlfriend or his new wife. The movie doesn't explain it. Some kid, generic businessman number 2, British designer guy, a random board member or chairman or something. I honestly can't remember, and I watched the scene 3 minutes ago. Let's compare this to a good biopic. A Complete Unknown, which chronicles Bob Dylan's early career. A Complete Unknown focuses its attention on a few key characters. Dylan, Joan Baez, Sylvie Rousseau, Pete Seeger, and Woody Guthrie, all of whom appear consistently throughout the movie. In the good Steve Jobs movie, Danny Boyle's Steve Jobs, all 3 acts contain the same 7 main characters: Steve, his secretary, his ex-girlfriend, his daughter Lisa, Steve Wozniak, Andy Hertzfeld, and John Scully. Watching Jobs is like being drunk and exhausted at 4 a.m. and trying desperately to get a taxi home, but people keep coming up to you to introduce themselves and start a conversation. I don't care who generic businessman number 2 is, because I was done with this piece of shit an hour and 40 minutes ago, and I just want this movie to end. Generic businessman number 2 reassures Steve by telling him,
I am not Arthur Rock.
No, I have absolutely no idea who Arthur Rock is. Generic board member 2 or 3 or whatever his name is asks Steve to come back as CEO. So Steve makes an inspiring speech accompanied by inspiring music to the board. But then generic businessman number 2 says something to the effect of, "You can't do this to me! I'm a generic businessman!" So the board votes, Steve wins, generic loses. Job ends with Steve giving an inspiring speech accompanied by inspiring music.
The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
This is boomer shit. Only a generation of people who entered adulthood at the most prosperous time and place in human history could believe such nonsense. This is exactly the kind of rubbish Tyler Durden was talking about when he said,
We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. We're slowly learning that fact. We're very, very pissed off.
Elizabeth Holmes, the Theranos CEO, was crazy enough to believe that she could change the world, and she did. She made it considerably harder for startups to get funding, set female entrepreneurs back years, and traumatized dozens of her employees by having them spied on, followed by hired goons, and threatened with lawfare. Narcissists with main character syndrome who think they are going to change the world can cause tremendous damage. The reality today for basically every starry-eyed young person eager to set out and change the world is disappointment. You're not going to change the world. You're going to be wrung dry by some boomer CEO who pays you shit on the dollar, a tech industry that is doing everything in their power to replace you with AI, and a private equity firm that owns the house you live in and just put your rent up 40% because if you won't pay, there's a million freshly imported slaves from the third world who will. You'll own nothing, you'll go hungry, and you'll fucking stay hungry.
Stay hungry.
If Steve Jobs had been born 30 years later, he would be just another burned out, broke-ass millennial on the corporate scrap heap, chewed up, shit out, and left to rot.
What was that?
I'm not going to answer that, Ashton. Instead, I'm going to suggest that my viewers watch Danny Boyle's Steve Jobs, which is an excellent movie and a great example of a biopic done well. See my Danny Boyle video for details. Jobs is a completely worthless movie, but it is a valuable lesson in bad screenwriting because it demonstrates what happens when a screenwriter assumes viewer knowledge, fails to build stakes, fails to communicate character motivation, fails to provide context for anything that is happening on screen, riddles the dialogue with cliches, and goes for payoffs with no setup. The film also commits the opposite mistake, setups which have no payoff, also known as breaking the Chekhov's gun principle. In one scene, Steve's daughter Lisa sends him an adorable little card which reads, "Daddy, can I come and see you?" And it never goes anywhere. Lisa isn't mentioned again and doesn't show up until much later in the movie when she is a teenager. She only appears for a few seconds, tells Steve to go away because she's trying to sleep. And that's it. That's all of Steve Jobs' relationship with his daughter in this movie. As a piece of writing, Jobs is a total failure. However, I have to admit, the movie does possess a unique charm. Jobs is one of the worst biopics ever made, but it isn't just shit, it's a special kind of shit. This movie features a character insisting that color video games cannot be done while standing several feet away from a poster of a color video game. A montage 10 minutes into the movie, an absurd number of inspiring speeches accompanied by music so generic it sounds like the composer was trying to parody the scene. A huge crowd materializes to hear about a product from a company no one has ever heard of. Steve's girlfriend disappears, then rematerializes to announce that she got pregnant during her absence from the script. Major dramatic moments center around characters the viewer cannot identify by name. Characters announce their personality traits, and when the movie wants to show that Steve is feeling the pressure, it just has him scream into the camera. Jobs is almost ahead of its time in how bad it is. The internet ruthlessly mocked Rings of Power for its horrendous pseudo-profound dialogue.
No one can give you a name. It is yours already. It is who you are. And when you hear it spoken, you feel your heart glow.
Jobs contained that kind of dialogue before it was cool.
And in your life, you only get to do so many things. And right now, we've chosen to do this.
And this flaming porta-potty of a movie is punctuated by Ashton Kutcher's hilariously awful performance. For these reasons, I, the Despot, confer upon Jobs the honorary rank of trashterpiece. Although Jobs did make a small profit, the box office didn't come close to expectations. Revenue was $42.1 million on a $12 million budget. Taking the $5.2 million marketing budget into account, the studios banked about $8 million on this job. Which they would not have been happy with. There were 5 studios backing this piece of shit. After distribution costs, each studio left the crime scene with maybe $1.5 million. A deservedly pathetic return on a thoroughly cynical, failed endeavor.
Everything is super when you're
Milk is a 2008 feature-length political propaganda film. Milk is turgid shit, but still one of the better movies I will be discussing in this video. In fact, it's not even in the bottom 20 biopics of this century. The primary reason I'm discussing Milk is because just as Jobs is the exemplar of the cash grab biopic, Milk is the exemplar of the awards bait biopic. Milk chronicles the political rise of Harvey Milk, a homosexual San Francisco city supervisor. The good guys in Milk are the gays. The bad guys are Christian conservatives who want to grant state districts the right to hold referendums which will, if passed, allow school districts the option to fire gay teachers. Our hero, the righteous crusader for justice, is Harvey Milk. He's good and charming and funny and forward-looking and just and stylish and good. Our villain, the Christian, conservative, legionary of evil, is the villainous Josh Brolin. He's bad and drunken and belligerent and aggressive and angry and dull and boring and jealous and brown and bad. Milk's messaging is about as subtle as Jobs' dialogue. Milk covers 8 years of Harvey Milk's life from when he becomes a community organizer in the Castro district of San Francisco at the age of 40 to his death. The first 10 minutes of the movie is actually quite good. Milk moves to Castro where he meets James Franco. They start a relationship and open a shop. The characters are likable, the dialogue is excellent, and the scene where Milk meets Franco carries real emotional weight. Milk confesses that he's alone on the night of his 40th birthday and begs for company in a sexually suggestive manner. Later that night, Milk reflects on his life, confiding to Franco that he regrets reaching the age of 40 without accomplishing anything in life. This is a good starting point, a humble protagonist who is at a low point in life, but still has some ambition at the age of 40, and a likable James Franco to share his feelings and celebrate his upcoming life growth with. Unfortunately, it's all downhill from here. The rest of the movie is people sitting in rooms talking politics, and not even interesting politics. If you are one of the 5 people who are interested in the history of identity politics, maybe you'll enjoy Milk. If you aren't, you'll be bored to sleep well before the halfway mark. Milk is like a vegan talking to you for 2 hours about his vegan diet, mildly interesting for about 3 minutes, boring after 5 minutes, exhausting after 15 minutes, and absolutely incredible after 30 minutes because your body has released a flood of endorphins into your brain to keep you from killing yourself. An interesting aspect of Milk is the film's broken moral compass. It portrays horrible behavior in a positive light because the filmmakers think it's good behavior. Barbie infamously did this in its positive portrayal of Barbie's counter-revolutionary restoration of the Ancien Regime, which crushed the Ken revolt and shoved the Kens back under the jackboot of matriarchal tyranny. Milk features the following exchange in which Harvey and James Franco openly conspire to take over an area which Harvey earlier described as a nice Irish Catholic neighborhood.
One block in one city, right? We'll start there, and then we'll take over the neighborhood.
In the same sequence, the movie positively portrays a gangster tactic employed by Milk.
I made a list of shops that were friendly to us and shops that weren't. Those shops that worked with us thrived. Those that didn't went out of business.
Wow, nice business you've got here, hard-working Irish Catholic father of 3. It sure would be a shame if you didn't lend your active support to a homosexual takeover of the neighborhood. Then the movie portrays Milk and his gangsters as power-hungry.
We weren't just a bunch of pansies anymore. We had had our first taste of power.
Later on, after Milk has lost his 2nd or 3rd election in a row, I couldn't be bothered checking, one of his arslicks holds up a districting map and says, "But look, Harvey, San Francisco are redistricting the city. If we can convince the city board to gerrymander a gay voting district into existence, we'll win the next election." Look at this district! It looks like a space shuttle! It's every bit as ridiculous as the district which gave rise to the term gerrymander, which looked like a salamander and was approved of by founding father Elbridge Gerry. The film admits that the only reason this middle-aged nobody got elected is because he lobbied the city to space shuttle-mander a gay voting district into existence so he could win a seat as its representative. Milk is the perfect Oscar bait biopic. The movie's central figure is a minority of some sort. It pushes political messages that Hollywood favors: gay good, conservative bad. It mythologizes a figure that the American left had long been trying to turn into a kind of gay version of Martin Luther King. It portrays Christians as bigots and gay political activism as a benign civil rights cause. It features superb lead performances and is well directed by Gus Van Sant, who is best known for directing Good Will Hunting. Milk oozes sanctimony like a giant slug oozing a feculent slime. Cosmopolitan types will sit through a showing of Milk as happy as pigs in shite, elated to see their worldview affirmed with such professionalism. They'll leave the theatre talking of this modern masterpiece that should win all the awards. Then they'll forget the movie exists and never watch it again. The fact that Milk is boring as fuck doesn't matter. It ticks all the correct boxes to win awards, and no one who hangs out with a fashionable social set, or, more importantly, is a member of a prestigious film critics association, will dare speak a word against the film, lest they be thought of as insufficiently dedicated to the cause. There's a scene in Milk in which a gay kid from Minnesota or something calls up Milk and says, "Sir, my parents are Christian conservatives and can't accept that I'm gay, so tomorrow they're sending me off to conversion therapy." And Milk says,
"Listen to me. You just get on a bus to the nearest biggest city."
Right now, the Academy members in the audience are rock hard, each of them already fantasizing about gleefully announcing Milk's win for Best Picture. But then, it gets even better.
Just leave.
I can't. I can't walk, sir.
Milk ended up winning 43 prestigious awards from various film organizations, including Oscars for Best Screenplay and Best Actor. The Best Actor Oscar was deserved. The Best Screenplay Oscar was not. That should have gone to Wall-E or Slumdog Millionaire. By the way, Diego Luna from Andor is in the movie, and he's brilliant. He plays Harvey Milk's manic boyfriend who commits suicide. Milk finds Diego dead and cries over his body, but bizarrely, Diego is never mentioned again for the rest of the movie. The movie ends with Josh Brolin assassinating the San Francisco mayor and executing Harvey Milk. Then there's a candlelight vigil to remind the Academy that in voting for Milk, they are supporting the cause of an oppressed group. I won't dive into the latrine of Milk's politics, but I do want to point out one thing I noticed. Milk includes footage of a gay pride parade in which a teacher holds up a placard that reads, "I teach Spanish, not sex." This is in response to local referendums which returned a yes vote on a proposition to allow school districts the option to fire gay teachers from schools, parents fearing that the teachers would attempt to recruit their children into a gay lifestyle. The message presented in Milk is clear. Gay teachers have no interest whatsoever in pushing homosexuality on your kids. 14 years later, another Hollywood movie featured the following scene.
Do you teach your students any gay history? Because I know in a few states they're finally starting to do it.
I teach second grade, so no.
Out of curiosity, why not?
Well, I just think they're a little young for that.
I don't think so, though. That's actually the best time to teach them, when they're young.
See my Bros video for details of that diabolical fecal expulsion. Apart from the lead performances, the most redeeming aspect of Milk is that the movie only covers 8 years of Harvey Milk's life. This allows the film to tell a single, coherent story, Harvey Milk's political rise. The same characters run throughout the movie. It's more visually cohesive because it portrays a single era. There's no cheesy aging makeup or needle drops to indicate a new decade, or subplots that the writer forgets about after the midway point, or characters popping in and out of existence. And characters don't have to tell the audience what year it is. Milk does a decent job of telling a very boring story. The movie earned almost $55 million on a $20 million budget. That, along with the solid awards haul, ensured that biopics would continue to scar the cultural landscape like a plague that never ends. The next big political biopic was 2011's The Iron Lady. Watching The Iron Lady is like going on a guided tour of a small, crappy Margaret Thatcher museum where the tour guide is a crazy old lady who doesn't know what month it is. The Iron Lady commits many of the same mistakes as Jobs: the greatest hit structure, genre tropes, complete absence of historical context, little to no characterization of minor characters, payoffs with no setup. The Iron Lady opens with the well-worn cliché of starting at the end and going back to the start. Doting Maggie dodders around her apartment for a while, then back to the start. It's World War II and Maggie is working in her father's grocery shop. The movie proceeds to fill in the biographical sections prescribed by the colour by numbers greatest hits format. Maggie survives the Blitz. She meets the man she will marry. She stands as an MP for Genericfordshire, but loses. She stands again and wins. She enters Parliament. She is subjected to sexism. She runs for party leadership, she wins, she receives media training, she becomes Prime Minister. And then the movie degenerates into a dizzying array of political crises, the most prominent of which is the Falklands War, and then she resigns as Prime Minister for some reason, and the movie goes back to the end. The Iron Lady is a truly awful movie. Thatcher's dotage is used as a narrative frame. She dodders around her apartment, stricken with dementia, hallucinating the presence of her dead husband, and taking whiskey-fueled nostalgia trips. These form the launching off points for the various greatest hits segments the movie muddles through on autopilot. The Iron Lady feels like two movies squashed into one. One movie is a by-the-numbers cash grab biopic, the other is an awards-bait drama. The cash grab is a remake of Jobs, but with Margaret Thatcher instead of Steve Jobs. The Oscar bait is the tragic portrayal of the tragedy of dementia, which is boring as hell, but contains a powerhouse performance that will win an Oscar. The Iron Lady is bizarrely politically neutral. The movie seems to go out of its way to avoid explaining any of Thatcher's domestic policies. In fact, it doesn't even explain what her policies were, instead resorting to nebulous language to insinuate her policies.
If you want to change this party, lead it. If you want to change the country, lead it.
There are no specific details about her Northern Ireland policies, her union busting, her destruction of shipbuilding and mining, her response to the hunger strike, her tax policies, her position on regulation or European integration or German unification, and no mention at all of the Soviet Union or Hong Kong. The movie doesn't even explain why she had to resign as Prime Minister. The poll tax. There is a scene in which she vaguely asserts that everyone should pay the same tax.
This is a simple proposition. If you live in this country, you must pay for the privilege. Something, anything.
But no attempt is made to explain whether she's talking about a flat rate, or income tax, or national insurance, or anything. The poll tax was a flat fee charged to every resident of the UK, intended to replace council tax. Every Brit, rich and poor alike, would pay the 2025 equivalent of £1,000, essentially a poverty tax. The poll tax was understandably extremely unpopular and led to massive riots, and ultimately the end of Thatcher's reign. None of this was explained in The Iron Lady. Instead, Thatcher is betrayed by a confidant, that guy, who challenges her for party leadership. This betrayal is treated as a major dramatic moment. There's just one problem.
Who the fuck is that guy?
The Iron Lady portrays no sense of Thatcher's mission. It communicates a completely surface-level idea of who she is, a strong-willed politician fighting with great tenacity for what she believes in, but the movie doesn't explain what it is that she believes in, or, more importantly, why she believes it. In fact, the filmmakers clearly went out of their way not to explain Thatcher's political beliefs and the motivation behind her policies. Why does she want to be an MP? Why does she want to lead the Tories? What changes does she want to make as Prime Minister? Why does she want Labour out of office? None of this is explored. The movie even omits Thatcher's most famous quote. It's ironic that an adaptation of Margaret Thatcher's career, The Iron Lady, the only British Prime Minister of the past half century with a spine, is such a spineless movie. The result of The Iron Lady's political cowardice is that basically everyone hated the movie, and rightfully so. Thatcher stans hated it because of the deliberate omission of political context, and because they didn't like the depiction of poor mad old Maggie doddering around her apartment suffering from dementia, which they regarded as mean and exploitative. Thatcher haters hated the movie because they felt it lionized Thatcher. In my Napoleon video, I mentioned the Frederick the Great quote, "He who defends everything defends nothing." With biopics, he who portrays everything portrays nothing by trying to cram Thatcher's entire life and career into a movie that is only 1 hour and 39 minutes in length. The filmmakers end up creating a dizzying, instantly forgettable montage of boring modern period drama set pieces. Even the Falkland Island sequence manages to be boring. The news reports come in that Argentina has invaded the islands. Maggie determinedly demands, "I want the Falklands back!" She spends the entire sequence in Maggie mode, determined, obstinate, and unshakable in her iron will.
Many men have underestimated me before. This lot seem bound to do the same, but they will rue the day.
This is a wasteful caricature. The reality of Thatcher's reaction to Argentina's invasion of the Falklands was much more interesting and dramatic. She was serene but quietly determined in TV interviews during the crisis.
If they're going to withdraw, they will decide to withdraw within the next few days. I would be so pleased if they did. Why do people talk about humiliation? I'm not seeking to humiliate anyone at all. I'm just asking that the invader returns his troops to the mainland.
But she was also haunted by the looming possibility of defeat. If the task force failed to retake the Falklands, Britain would be utterly humiliated on the world stage. Her status as any sort of power would be over. Thatcher would be forced to resign and would go down as one of Britain's worst PMs. The stakes for Operation Get Your Filthy Fucking Hands Off My Rock collection were enormous, and the movie completely failed to communicate them, and so the viewer feels none of the catharsis or the joy that one should feel in seeing a righteous end to the Virgin Argentina's pathetic attempt to steal the Chad rock collection. The Iron Lady was universally panned. Audiences and critics gave it a 51% Rotten Tomatoes score. No one from either side of the political divide had even the slightest interest in defending this dross. Despite being completely forgotten, the Iron Lady's legacy continues to be felt to this day. The movie was a massive financial success. It cost $13 million and made $116 million at the box office and won an Oscar into the bargain. This success ensured that vapid, low-effort biopics would continue to besmirch theaters. Movie studios set out immediately to imitate the low-risk, high-reward, cash-grab production model that the Iron Lady exemplifies. Jobs was rushed into production shortly after the Iron Lady's success and defecated into theaters the following year. 2013 also saw the release of the appallingly named Jimmy All Is By My Side, starring Andre 3000 as Jimi Hendrix, a box office calamity that made less than $1 million on a $5 million budget and put an end to Andre 3000's decade-long attempt to break into acting. 2013 also vomited Diana into theaters, a Princess Diana biopic. The studios involved did at least have the good sense not to name this movie Spencer, All That Is Around Me, but the movie was still a flop, a $21.7 million haul against a $15 million budget. I've never seen Diana and never will, obviously. 2013 also bore witness to the excretion of Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom is a remake of Jobs, but with Nelson Mandela instead of Steve Jobs. This movie is a 2-hour-long blowjob. The thoroughness with which it fillets Nelson Mandela would put Harvey Milk's Catamites to shame. Long Walk to Freedom is the most sycophantic hagiography I have ever seen. Mandela is portrayed as a peace-loving, all-knowing saint who was wise, just, and oppressed for his goodness. There is no mention of his request to communist China to supply weapons to his organization, the ANC, for an armed uprising, a request which the Chinese wisely rejected, as they knew it would cause extensive bloodshed with no result. There is no mention of Mandela's vocal support for third world dictators such as Fidel Castro, or the fact that his first wife divorced him citing extensive physical abuse, or his extramarital affairs which produced at least one bastard child, which Mandela never recognized. Mandela's own mother was so disgusted with his behavior at this time that she left him and returned home. After his divorce, Mandela abandoned his 2 legitimate children to pursue politics. This abandonment of his family is portrayed in Long Walk to Freedom as a noble sacrifice. In 1962, Mandela went to Ethiopia to enroll in a 6-month guerrilla warfare course, but he got bored after 2 months and returned to South Africa. He was captured by the South African authorities a few months later. Mandela's own organisation, the ANC, later admitted that Mandela was just plain bad at revolution. He stayed in the same place too long, he brought far too many people to his safe houses, and travelled too conspicuously. For a depiction of a man who did know how to do armed revolt, watch Michael Collins, one of the best biopics of the 90s, featuring superb performances from Liam Neeson and Alan Rickman. Mandela's presidency was a mixed bag. He was a strong advocate for national reconciliation between whites and blacks, as he was aware that the alternative was Zimbabwe, an impoverished basket case which had once been a thriving nation called Rhodesia before Robert Mugabe took power, stole all the white-owned land and handed it to blacks who didn't know how to farm it. The result was famine, economic collapse, and the worst hyperinflation in history. Here is an image of a Zimbabwean $100 trillion bill, a single image which testifies to the wisdom of Mandela's reconciliation policy. Mandela also made significant improvements in education, literacy, foreign investment, housing, and access to healthcare and electricity, but crime and corruption skyrocketed, and the AIDS crisis worsened considerably. By 1999, 10% of South Africans had AIDS, though in fairness, I doubt any government could have prevented this disaster. So-called positive discrimination, forcing companies to limit the number of whites they employed, caused a competency crisis. Unqualified blacks were given jobs they couldn't perform properly, and white flight from the country began to accelerate, causing a brain drain. The result was a decline in the general quality of public and private services. This is difficult to quantify, so if there are South Africans watching this video, please comment about the consequences of positive discrimination. Millions of illegal migrants flooded into the country from poorer parts of Africa. South Africans were understandably furious about this, but this was one crisis that Mandela was able to solve with one genius trick. He told South Africans to embrace them as brothers and sisters. The reality of Nelson Mandela is that he was an extremely flawed man who wasn't particularly good at anything other than rhetoric, but boomers fucking worshipped this guy. They thought of him as a kind of demigod, a living embodiment of liberal utopianism. I recently watched an obscure Danny Boyle movie from 2004 called Millions, and I noticed that in one scene, a poster of Mandela features prominently on the wall of an English public school. Why? Mandela Long Walk to Freedom is a boomer fever dream, a childishly naive vision of a great man whose very life was a mythic odyssey. At the start of the movie, he's a fun-loving young lawyer in his 20s, indifferent to politics and more interested in sports and lovemaking, but he's dragged into the cause against his will by the injustice he sees around him. This is a fantasy based on the romantic notion of the cause seeking the man rather than the man seeking the cause, which could be interpreted as power seeking. The idea that the office should seek the man has been around as long as politics. American presidential candidates didn't start publicly campaigning for office until the late 19th century because they didn't want to be seen as power-hungry. Long Walk to Freedom's first priority is to safeguard Mandela's image. It does this primarily by lying. In reality, Mandela was heavily involved in politics from his earliest days as a lawyer in Johannesburg, where he attended Communist Party meetings, though he didn't join the party. Within the first 30 minutes, Long Walk to Freedom jumps from Mandela's childhood to 1942 when he's practicing law, then to his marriage, kids, marriage breakdown, divorce, activism, first arrest, visit to his distraught mother, second marriage, more activism. The movie just goes through the motions on autopilot without ever giving the viewer the sense that there's a point to any of this other than to mythologize Nelson Mandela. The whites are presented as cartoon villains. Needless to say, their perspective is next to non-existent in the movie, though they do get one line to voice their concerns.
Can you imagine what the blacks would do to us if they got us in their power?
When Nelson Mandela turns to terrorism as a means of achieving his political ends, the script provides him with a journalist to justify his actions to. It should be noted that the terrorism campaign was infrastructural sabotage and was designed to avoid civilian casualties. Although that doesn't really make any sense because when you shut down a power plant, you kill patients at local hospitals who are dependent on machines to keep them alive. But sycophancy isn't even the worst aspect of the movie. tedium is, Long Walk to Freedom is a grueling watch. It is oppressively boring. Long scenes of Idris Elba looking and sounding ridiculous as he pontificates in neo-mythic prose across the dreary tracklist of yet another greatest hits compilation, all blend together into one big, instantly forgettable yawn. The movie is so disinterested in doing anything other than mythologizing Nelson Mandela that it doesn't even attempt to examine his presidency or what became of the great rainbow utopia Mandela established, the Rainbow Nation, modern South Africa. How did that work out for you, by the way, South Africa? Everything going well? Splendid. Long Walk to Freedom is not without its redeeming features. The movie ruthlessly vilifies whites, but it doesn't pretend that the blacks were innocent victims of oppression, completely devoid of agency. In one scene, Winnie Mandela calls on an angry crowd to hunt down and murder informants. The crowd duly chases down some poor bastard, and without even giving the man the courtesy of a kangaroo court, necklaces him. Blacks are also shown firing on white police, and one sequence shows a mob of armed Zulus rampaging through a township, slaughtering all they come across, as well as the tragic aftermath. Winnie Mandela's bloodthirsty revanchism contrasts against Mandela's calls for peace. This provides the viewer with something the Iron Lady completely lacked: political context. Mandela Long Walk to Freedom is a thoroughly crap film, but it is superior to the Iron Lady by a comfortable margin, which emphasizes just how bad the Iron Lady is. The segment of Long Walk to Freedom examining South Africa's descent into near civil war, Nelson and Winnie's differing stances on the crisis, and the resulting collapse of their marriage is easily the best in the movie. Winnie is portrayed as a bloodthirsty witch who would cast the entire nation into the inferno of civil war just to satiate her own lust for power and vengeance. If the entire movie had focused on that period of Mandela's life, this could have been a good movie. The talent was there. Naomi Harris and Idris Elba do the best that could have been expected from any actor with the used toilet paper that passes for a script. The movie ends with Mandela's election as president. Unlike South Africa, the Mandela Long Walk to Freedom production does have a happy ending. The movie cratered at the box office, earning $28 million against a $35 million budget. It received crap scores from critics and audiences and was quickly forgotten.
I wish I'd never seen it.
Nina is a 2016 biopic of Nina Simone starring Zoe Saldana. Now, I'm going to get straight to the point on this one. Should you spend 1.5 hours of your life watching Nina?
No.
Out of all the movies covered in this video, Nina has the distinction of grossing the lowest box office, featuring the worst lead performance, receiving the lowest Rotten Tomatoes audience score, 25%, and the second lowest critic score, 2%. Yes, there's a biopic that managed to get a lower score than 2%. We'll be discussing it in a bit. From her opening scene, it is obvious that Zoe Saldana does not want to be here. She sits behind the piano like an upright carcass, reluctantly miming the words and clearly bored out of her mind. I have seen hostage videos where the hostage looked like he wanted to be there more than Zoe Saldana wants to be in this movie. Nina Simone was passionate and energetic when she performed. Zoe Saldana is flaccid and lethargic, and that's not even close to the worst crime this movie commits in its portrayal of Nina Simone. Zoe Saldana's shite singing voice is. Here's a sample of Nina Simone's singing voice.
I know how it feels to be free.
I apologize that YouTube's copyright system does not permit a longer clip. Here is a sample of Zoe Saldana's voice.
And this old world is a new world and a bold world.
I thank YouTube's copyright system for sparing my viewers from a longer clip. Nina had an incredible voice. For a start, she could actually hit the fucking notes and didn't need every held vowel drenched in auto-tune. Nina also had a unique sounding voice, bursting with personality. Her vocal affectations were hers. They were idiosyncratic, colourful, and beautiful. Zoe Saldana's voice has no personality. Her voice is so generic that it could be the vocal to an AI song. Neither Saldana nor the filmmakers put any effort whatsoever into getting Saldana's voice to sound even remotely like Nina Simone's, and they didn't want the expense of hiring a professional singer and paying for more studio time. The result is that Saldana sounds like some chick giving a middling performance on karaoke night at the local, which you briefly applaud out of politeness and are unable to recall by the time you finish your already half-empty pint. The movie deals with the tremendous challenge of accurately depicting Nina Simone's virtuoso piano playing by not bothering with it. And anyway, who wants to see Nina intricately weave her piano and voice lines beautifully together in a magnificent flourish when you can see Nina throwing a champagne bottle?
Fuck off! Stop watering down my champagne!
Also, this movie does not contain any of Nina Simone's compositions. The filmmakers couldn't obtain permission to use Simone's songs because the estate wanted nothing to do with the movie. In fact, they hated the very concept of the movie. Fortunately, the filmmakers came up with a brilliant solution to this problem. They had a fan read out a list of Simone's songs.
Nina Simone, Fruit of the Earth. Let me see that. I haven't seen this in a long time. Nina Simone?
All of the songs Zoe Saldana half-asses in the movie are songs that Nina Simone covered. Quick note to avoid confusion between the real person and the audio-visual sludge that appropriates her name, I will henceforth be referring to this movie as Nina 2016. Zoe Saldana didn't even settle on a speaking voice for her performance. In some scenes, her voice is fairly generic.
You should see me in Nice. I'm a star in Nice, come on. Yes, yes, yes. Let's go!
And in others, it's much more pronounced and idiosyncratic.
Back then I only sang about love because I didn't have it as a child. And of course, I'm black, so I had to sing about that too.
Nina 2016 has no plot, no character arcs, no dramatic arc, no themes, no production design to speak of, no audiovisual aesthetic, and not a single good scene. I honestly can't remember if it has even one redeeming aspect. Zoe, does Nina 2016 have any redeeming aspects?
No.
Here is what passes for a plot in this movie. After learning that she no longer owns the copyright to her own songs, Zoe Saldana pulls a gun on her accountant.
Tell him to give me my money!
Then she gets tossed in a nut house for a day, where she receives her characterization from an assistant who reads out a list of her character traits.
She's a diagnosed alcoholic, diagnosed manic depressive, diagnosed mild paranoia, severe dysfunction when off medication.
In the nut house, Zoe meets a male nurse called Cliff or Clay or something. She takes a fancy to Clint and hires him as her assistant and goes to France to do a tour. The film covers the entirety of Zoe's musical activities in France in a 21-second scene which forms part of a montage and a concert at which she plays for 1 minute and 5 seconds before getting up to knife some guy because he was talking during her performance. The first musical tour in this movie contains less than 1.5 minutes of Zoe performing. 95% of the first France sequence is Zoe milling around whatever house she has rented where she abuses drugs, alcohol, and Clyde.
Well, you need to eat something first.
Listen, motherfucker, you work for me, okay?
At one point, she demands sex from Clark, and when he refuses, she accuses him of being a homosexual. Soon after, Zoe demands that Clive procure a groupie for her, which he does. The next day, he quits, saying he doesn't want to be her pimp. Zoe's reaction to Claude quitting is a fairly good summation of her performance.
Clifton.
This is not a case of an actor not giving a fuck, like Samuel L. Jackson in every movie he's been in over the past decade. Zoe Saldana is giving minus fucks in this performance. After that, Zoe mills around back home for a bit, then goes to Clayton's house to rehire him. That guy makes a cameo appearance as Clinton's dad. There is a truly bizarre sequence inserted into the movie in the middle of this scene. 1 second, Zoe is talking to that guy, then the scene is interrupted by a flashback to Zoe learning of Martin Luther King's assassination, which she cries over and writes a song about. Then the movie goes back to the conversation between Zoe and that guy, as if it had never been interrupted, and Martin Luther King is never mentioned again. My guess is that the filmmakers crowbarred the MLK sequence in because they wanted to entice awards nominations by presenting Nina 2016 as a black struggle movie. It didn't work, but Zoe Saldana did get nominated for an Invisible Woman Award for her performance. No, I have no idea what an Invisible Woman Award is. Zoe, do you know what an Invisible Woman Award is?
No.
Anyway, after Martin Luther King is shot, Zoe hires Clement as her manager, and they fuck off back to France for another tour. But Zoe doesn't like France because it's too sunny.
I don't like so much sunlight.
Klein asks,
why am I back here, Nina?
Why didn't he ask her this before they arrived in France? Clancy tries and fails to book Zoe a gig. Her former manager advises him to get Zoe in shape, get her to clean up her act, which leads to the only good thing to come out of this movie.
Want to go to the gym?
No. After the meme, there's a Rocky montage that consists of a single shot that lasts 47 seconds. Then the movie forgets about Cleveland's attempt to get Zoe clean, and Zoe goes back to being a degenerate. Zoe plays one concert, then has an important conversation with some guy, which is supposed to have immense dramatic and emotional significance. There is just one problem.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Nina records some music, Clovis is buzzing around the studio during the session for some reason, then Claxton finds out about her cancer diagnosis. Oh yeah, she got a cancer diagnosis somewhere in the middle of the film. I couldn't be bothered checking to find out precisely where. The movie does briefly get the viewer's hopes up that this Zoe creature will die of cancer, but nothing comes of it. And unfortunately, Zoe lives to sing another day.
Hello, very nice to meet you. I'd like to know about sex change operation.
I see.
Zoe gets cancer treatment, mills around for a bit, then plays a concert in either San Francisco or New York. I can't remember which. The end. Zoe spends the entire movie a degenerate layabout. She is exactly the same at the end as she was at the start. There's no character growth, no career growth, no thematic through line, no dramatic rise and fall, no redemption, no meaning. Nina 2016 has no meaning. It's pointless. This movie has no legitimate reason to exist. Predictably, critics fucked up their response to Nina 2016, giving it 2% on Rotten Tomatoes, a score which vastly exceeds what the movie deserves. Nina was written and directed by Cynthia Mort, who had never directed a movie before. She had worked in TV and was a co-writer on 2007 box office bomb The Brave One, starring Jodie Foster. Karen iPhone, read the summary for The Brave One.
Struggling to recover emotionally from a brutal assault that killed her fiancé and left her in a coma, a radio personality begins a quest for vengeance against the perpetrators that leaves a bloody trail across New York City.
I might have to check that out. Nina was greenlit in 2010 as part of the biopic gold rush that hit Hollywood in the wake of the massive success of The Social Network and The King's Speech. After more than half a decade of development hell, which included the writer-director suing the production company for cutting her out of decision-making, the trailer for Nina 2016 hit YouTube with about as much welcome as bird shit on a car windscreen. Nina 2016's trailer went down like a dementia joke at Margaret Thatcher's funeral. The movie looked and sounded like ass, and the production was criticised for casting Zoe Saldana because she wasn't black enough. Unfortunately, I can't weigh in on this debate because I don't care enough to bother researching Zoe Saldana's ethnic background. Following the trailer release, the Nina Simone Estate's Twitter account posted the following. Please take Nina's name out of your mouth. For the rest of your life, hopefully people begin to understand this is painful, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, nauseating, soul-crushing. It shall pass. But for now. No one asked for this movie, and everyone wanted it to fail.
This is insulting because this is just as bad to me as a white person in blackface.
Following the universally negative reception to the trailer, the studios behind Nina 2016 probably knew the movie wasn't going to make money. But fuck, man. Even after the backlash, I don't think the filmmakers ever imagined in their worst nightmares that the box office would be as bad as it turned out. On a budget of $7 million, Nina 2016 made $22,504. Nina was a doomed project. Ian Watkins has a better chance of making a successful comeback than Nina had of making money. In 2020, Zoe Saldana apologized for performing in the movie.
I should have never played Nina. I should have never played Nina. I should have tried everything in my power to cast a black woman to play an exceptionally perfect black woman.
Nina 2016 was a disgrace, a critical and commercial disaster, a black mark on Zoe Saldana's career. Get it? Black mark. And arguably the worst biopic of the century. But one positive did come out of Nina 2016. Right, Zoe?
No.
Gotti was finally defecated from the bowels of 8 years of development hell into the latrine of cultural waste in 2018. Gotti chronicles the career of notorious mobster John Gotti, played by John Travolta. Lionsgate secured distribution rights to Gotti during pre-production, but the finished movie was so bad that after seeing it, Lionsgate sold the movie back to its producers and refused to have any further involvement. They didn't offer money for reshoots or ask for a re-edit, they just got rid of it. Lionsgate, the studio that last year released The Crow 2024 and Borderlands, regarded Gotti as being beneath their standards. The producers somehow managed to find 2 new distributors for Gotti. I have never heard of either of these distributors, and one of them doesn't have a Wikipedia page. Gotti has the distinction of receiving the lowest online review score of any biopic. The movie has a Rotten Tomatoes critic score of 0% and a 44% audience score. Only 43 movies with 20 or more critic reviews have ever received a 0% Rotten Tomatoes critic score. To put that into context, more people have been killed by vending machines than movies have received a 0% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. No small achievement. The only positive statement you will hear me make in defense of Gotti is that it isn't the worst biopic ever made. Don't worry, Blonde, we'll get to you shortly. I give Gotti a solid 0.5 out of 10. There's a couple of entertaining mob hits, and that's it. This movie is unwatchable. Gotti was released in an unreleasable state. We'll begin by addressing the 63-year-old elephant in the room. John Travolta was 63 years old during principal photography. That's 2 years older than John Gotti was when he died. The movie starts in 1973. A fresh-faced, sprightly 32-year-old John Gotti is tasked with carrying out an important hit by the leadership of the Gambino crime family. This scene is supposed to depict a young up-and-comer receiving his first big job from the boss. What I see is 3 old men sitting down to share a few drinks and bellyache about the kids these days. I will give John Travolta credit though, he doesn't look 63 years old. He looks more like 68, 69. Every scene between John Gotti and his young kids looks ridiculous. I was genuinely confused at the start of this movie. I had never heard of John Gotti before watching this movie, so I thought he must have married a much younger woman and started a family very late in life. And when he was given the hit job at the start of the movie, I assumed he was already a high-level boss within the family and that the head of the family was telling him to organize the hit, not go out and do it himself. I eventually realized that John Travolta was portraying a man much younger than himself, but I had no idea how old. I thought maybe 40s. I was shocked when I discovered that Travolta is portraying a man in his early 30s in this scene. Travolta has his hair dyed black for the opening scene, but a couple of scenes later when he's with his kids, his hair is grey. When I first saw this, I thought these kids were John Gotti's grandchildren or nephews, but no. They're supposed to be his kids. The production should have hired a different, younger actor to play young John Gotti and had John Travolta play old John Gotti. The Iron Lady might have been dementia-ridden garbage, but at least the filmmakers had the basic common sense to cast a young woman to play young Maggie. Apart from John Travolta's age, the biggest problem with Gotti is that the narrative is a mangled ruin. The movie is impossible to follow. I had no idea what the hell was happening most of the time, and on the rare occasions I was able to grasp one of this movie's many story threads, that thread is quickly abandoned. Here's one example. John Jr. is out partying with friends. They go to a cop bar, get into a bar fight, one of Jr.'s friends stabs and kills an off-duty cop, and then everybody bolts. In the next scene, John Gotti shows up furious and explains to his idiot son that a massive amount of heat is going to be brought down on the family as a result of the bar murder. There will be massive fallout from the incident. Okay, I have no idea who this old fat guy is, but I'm following along, and I'm vaguely interested to see how the cops will seek revenge and how John Gotti will deal with the problem. But then the movie proceeds as if the bar fight never took place. The next sequence is about the Angelo Ruggiero tapes, phone conversations recorded by the FBI, which may or may not have been incriminating, I can't remember. I also don't know who Angelo Ruggiero is, or if the name refers to one person or 2 people. The murdered cop is never mentioned again, there are no consequences for it, the bar fight fallout plot is completely abandoned and never comes up again. Gotti has an and then structure, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens.
These beats, which are basically the beats of your outline. And if the words and then belong between those beats, you're f***ed, basically. You got something pretty boring. What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore, or but.
But it's actually worse than that, because the and thens in Gotti are often spaced out by several years. Gotti kills a guy in a bar, and then a couple of years later he's in jail, and then a couple of years after that he's running a New York neighborhood, and then he's conspiring with a crew in a nightclub, and then his son dies, and then a few years after that the bar fight happens, and then a couple of years after that the Angelo tapes, then a couple of years later he's on trial for something, I don't know what, and then he starts conspiring to whack the boss Paul, whoever that is, and take over the Gambinos. So he whacks Paul and takes over, and then there's some fallout from the coup, and then this old guy betrays him or something. I'm not sure. So he gets exiled, and then John gets put on trial again. I don't know why. Then there's a mob wedding with one of those fucking dreadful Frank Sinatra crooner numbers. While this scattered rubbish heap of a plot is being shat across the screen, the movie keeps jumping back to a boring conversation between John and John Jr., which is happening many years later. Gotti is just a collage of unrelated, out-of-sequence events. Then John Gotti dies of cancer in prison. His son spends some time in jail for nebulous reasons, then goes free. Then the movie ends with the ghost of John Gotti telling his audience what a unique and special individual he was.
You're never gonna see another guy like me if you live to be 5,000.
What the fuck are you talking about, man? The movie portrayed you as an amalgam of mafia wise guy stereotypes. You come off as a thuggish gangster so banal and predictable in your tastes and behaviour that you may as well have come out of a cloning tank on Geonosis after being manufactured from DNA extracted from shitty Hollywood gangster movies. You're not Mew, you're Ratata. Then, in another bizarre creative choice, the credit song is generic gangster rap. For the law, for the feds, rock cops, pop, pop. This makes no sense. At no point throughout the movie has there been a shred of rap in the soundtrack, and the aesthetic of the movie could not be further away from rap. Karen iPhone, create a remix of a classic movie ending using the Gotti method. For the law, for the feds, rock cops, pop, pop. Not only is Gotti's non-linear, non-sequential, non-plot a confusing mess, even the narrative frame is confusing. Gotti is the only movie I have ever seen that has not one, but two narrative frames. The first is the ghost of John Gotti. He addresses the viewer and introduces his story, narrates sporadically throughout, and closes by asserting that he is a first edition Charizard. The second framing device is a meeting that takes place between John Gotti and his son John Jr. Jr. says he wants to take a plea deal. His dad says fuck that. They go back and forth, and this dull, one-note conversation has to take place sporadically throughout the movie for some reason. By the way, the guy who plays John Jr., Spencer LaFranco, was awful. His emotive range consists of a furrowed brow and a slightly less furrowed brow. Gotti was his last movie. According to his Wikipedia page, quote, by 2018, LaFranco, by choice, was living on the beach as a homeless person, selling his art, and went by the nickname Fire.
Honestly, they should have cast me as Gotti, and they should have actually had me in more of the movie instead of fucking John fucking stupid Travolta. Movie did suck though, no shit, because they fucking didn't write it good, and they should have had me as the star of it. For the law, for the feds, rock cops, pop, pop. I finished watching Gotti about 5 hours ago as I write this, and the only characters I can name are John Gotti and his son, John Gotti Jr. But the problem isn't just that I can't name the characters, I have no idea who the various characters are or what their functions are. I know the wife is supposed to be Gotti's wife, his son is an up-and-comer in the Gambinos, and that's it. Like, this guy is really important, apparently. But I have no idea who he is, why he's here, what his motivations are, what he's likely to do, how he's going to react to various events. Compare this to Sonny from The Godfather. You know exactly who Sonny is, you know what he's like, what he wants, how he thinks the family should operate, and how he will react when he gets news that his brother-in-law just gave his sister a beating. Everything is clear and easy to understand. Gotti is muddled and confusing, and this is a serious problem because there are constant name drops referring to characters the viewer needs to be familiar with to make sense of the scene. Here's a particularly egregious example.
So you'll need the Chico. If he's on board, then Joe Piney will join you. He'll take care of the old-timers. And Gallo will go along.
What in heaven's name are you talking about?
even the broader picture isn't explained. The movie does explain that John is a member of the Gambino crime family, but here's the thing. What the fuck is the Gambino crime family? How big are they? How many members do they have? What is their reach? Are their operations restricted to New York? What's their body count? What's their annual revenue? What are their most important operations? What is their main product? Who are their main rivals? What are their long-term goals? What are the obstacles to those goals? Who are they paying off? Are the feds trying to bring them down? How? Who is the boss? Is he popular? Is he competent? Gotti does not answer a single one of these questions. There is no context for anything that is going on. There is no world building. The movie is little more than a sequence of tropey scenes in which stock gangster characters have cliche-ridden conversations about standard gangster movie tropes. The feds are on to us. Polly's gotta go. That motherfucker put a hit on a made man without my say-so. You see this guy? This guy. I want you to put a hit out on him. Joey's a rat. He's a fucking rat. Etc. Compare that to Scarface. You know exactly what Tony wants and why. You know how big his operation is at any given moment in the narrative. You know that his principal product is cocaine. You know how much money he's making, how much it's costing him to launder his money, what he's spending the money on, the geographical reach of his operation, and what efforts the feds are making to bring down his drug empire. Every scene has a clear function and place in the narrative, and Tony's speech and dialogue is unique, idiosyncratic, and memorable, a total contrast to the low-effort, wise guy that spews out of Gotti like fecal expulsions from a corpse. The end of the movie shows contemporary TV footage of New Yorkers mourning John Gotti and saying he was a great guy who kept the community safe and everybody loved him. But none of this has been shown. The only good thing he does throughout the movie is instruct a goon to help an old woman carry her shopping home. Apart from that, he's just a tropey character from a 14-year-old's first attempt at writing a gangster screenplay. The cinematography on Gotti is hideous. The visuals are washed out, desaturated, and darkened to an absurd degree. Here is a comparison of the original visuals at the top of your screen, and below an improved version with significantly increased brightness and saturation, which I did myself in 30 seconds on my free video editor. The frame often doesn't give characters enough headroom. The frame frequently cuts off the tops of characters' heads while they are speaking. For some unfathomable reason, the director chose to go with mild shaky cam in some scenes. The only effect this has on the viewer is irritation. Important reaction shots are often omitted. For example, in John's first big hit, the camera should either track John and his two thugs from the front as they walk out of the bar, capturing their reaction to this important hit, or it should rest on the bar wench, capturing her reaction, particularly important since she will later finger John for the murder. But instead, the director has the camera watch John and the thugs walk out of the bar from the eye level of John's victim. This shot captures nothing. The sound mixing is also poor at times. Gotti was directed by an obscure actor-director of no repute called Kevin Connolly. His most notable directing credit prior to Gotti was a 2016 movie called Dear Eleanor, described thusly on IMDb. The movie stars Jessica Alba and Arnold Schwarzenegger's son. It has a 43% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Lionsgate have made a lot of mistakes in their recent history. But dumping Gotti wasn't one of them. Gotti made a miserable $6.4 million on a $10 million budget. But this turd wasn't quite ready to flush quietly into its final resting place in the latrine of forgotten cinematic sewage. In a primitive attempt at damage control, one of Gotti's financial backers manipulated the movie's Rotten Tomatoes audience score. Following its Cannes premiere, Gotti received the venerated 0% critic score, but the audience score on opening weekend started out at a suspiciously high 80%, but it wasn't the score that raised suspicion, it was the number of audience ratings posted on the site. Gotti got 7,000 user reviews after opening on 500 screens. For comparison, The Incredibles 2 opened the same weekend and got 7,600 reviews, despite making 105 times more than Gotti at the box office. Upon further investigation, internet sleuths discovered that 45 of the first 58 reviewers created their profile in June 2018, the same month Gotti released. The likely culprit of the manipulation was revealed by the fact that these new profiles had only reviewed one other movie, American Animals. What do American Animals and Gotti have in common? Both movies are owned by MoviePass, a subscription-based movie ticketing service. MoviePass's crude attempt to manipulate audiences proved unsuccessful, and the audience score quickly collapsed once real reviews started pouring in. MoviePass reached their peak of over 3 million subscribers the same month Gotti came out, but the company was having some financial trouble, so they decided to cut a few corners. In August of that storied year, they decided to shift subscribers to a limited monthly plan rather than the unlimited annual plan the subscribers had already paid for. The company told its subscribers that if they didn't like this new plan, then they should cancel their membership.
If you don't like it, don't watch it.
And receive a partial refund, maybe possibly. But MoviePass warned their subs that anyone who cancelled the service wouldn't be permitted to rejoin MoviePass for 9 months. Within a month, 1 million subscribers had cancelled the service. 2 class action lawsuits followed, and by June 2019, MoviePass had lost 90% of its subscribers. The company announced its closure in 2019 and began bankruptcy proceedings.
Peace!
And now we descend into the charred depths of a depravity so impure that its very name has become a curse. The Leviathan that carries despair upon its flesh and oblivion in its wake. The calamity that sows desolation in the hearts of the pure, that ravages hope that eternal woe might take root in the salted fields of lifeless waste that once were verdant before the accursed was nightmared upon them. The cataclysm that rides alongside the horsemen of the apocalypse in a Jaguar 00, a creature of such vileness that Lucifer himself turns away from it, for his eyes cannot withstand the agony, an iniquity so terrifying that the legions of hell flee before it, an evil so complete that it blackens the soul of all who are forced to behold its corruption. Bohemian Rhapsody. Bohemian Rhapsody is the final boss of garbage biopics, the end point of a film genre that had been metastasizing for decades, the ultimate monstrous incarnation of the musical biopic. The movie hits every predictable dramatic beat, every played out trope, and demonstrates the worst tendencies of the greatest hits biopic structure to an extreme degree. Bohemian Rhapsody is the biopicest biopic ever to have biopiced. It is one of the most formulaic movies ever made.
I like formulas.
From the opening scene, Bohemian Rhapsody is a trope fest. The movie opens with 3 tropes occurring simultaneously, introducing the main character as he wakes up, starting at the beginning and then going back to the start, and a cheesy needle drop. The entire opening sequence is a microcosm of the movie, a bland montage of the trappings of rock stardom packed into a couple of minutes. Waking up hungover, big crowds, celebrities, kimonos, kittens, big house, cool jacket, pretentious art, expensive car, mic, music, drugs, adoration, aura, lights, fans, camera. The entire sequence is set to the immortal Somebody to Love to hypnotize viewers into thinking they're watching something truly special. The song does not match the aesthetic or the tempo of the visuals, but this movie is going to win the Oscar for Best Editing anyway, because the Academy doesn't really know what editing means. They just like the Live Aid performance scene. None of the opening visuals communicate anything other than the most basic, surface-level information, but it's awesome because the song is awesome. Back at the start, Freddie's mother is adoring him, but then she's done adoring him, so the director gives Freddie's dad his cue to enter stage right. So he enters stage right and says something to the effect of, "You've got to give up your dreams of stardom and become a man, Freddie. I mean Farouk." With that trope out of the way, Freddie heads off to a smile gig. He introduces himself to the band, and it just so happens that their singer quit 5 minutes ago, and it just so happens that Freddie is a virtuoso singer, so he joins the band. The filmmakers had the brilliant idea of replacing reality with plot contrivance. In reality, Freddie was friends with the band, attending their gigs, and constantly giving them advice. When their singer quit, Freddie readily stepped in. The movie decides that there should be an origin story for Freddie's style of walking around on stage holding the mic boom, as opposed to just the mic, so they invent an origin story. At his debut gig with Smile, Freddie can't wrest the mic free of its clip, so he takes the entire mic boom instead. This is a small detail, but it demonstrates how the filmmakers prioritized cheap dramatization rather than a serious exploration of what made Queen a great band. A few spectators object to the absence of the previous singer, but Freddie instantly wins them over, Oversimplification of narrative devolves the film into farce in the next sequence. Queen sell their van so they can record the first album, they rent a studio, and Freddie says,
"You're recording an album tonight."
In reality, Queen 1 was not recorded in 12 hours. It took 3 months of evening and overnight sessions. Several songs were reworked extensively. Keep Yourself Alive was re-recorded twice and remixed 8 times. Instead of showing the extensive effort that went into the album, the recording session is presented as a half-assed fuck around. Queen look like overexcited children playing in their daddy's recording studio. After that, Freddie spends some time with his girlfriend. Then the script calls Freddie and tells him that Act 1 is over and it needs Queen to become famous now so they can tour America. So Queen become famous and start touring America. There is no transition to fame at all. Queen are playing a pissy dive bar in the arse end of London, and 13 minutes later, they're playing sold-out arenas in the USA. The movie doesn't even attempt to justify this with a hit song. Fat Bottom Girls is playing during the sequence though, and that's a great song, so that means the sequence is great. In an effort to obtain funding for a night at the opera, Queen give a sales pitch to Philistine Moneyberg, a record exec who lives in a chair behind a desk and whose function is to express doubt about Queen's musical genius and to listen to Freddie Mercury give inspiring speeches. Philistine Moneyberg never existed in real life. The movie just made him up so he could act as a straw man of Philistine corporate moneymen label executives and listen to Freddie Mercury give inspiring, inspiring speeches about a night at the opera. Also, the Phil Moneyberg scene doesn't make sense because elevator pitches for albums aren't a thing in the music industry. Demos are. Also, Queen didn't require a green light to record A Night at the Opera. Their previous album, Sheer Heart Attack, had been a big hit. It reached number 2 in the UK and number 12 in the USA. Queen could do whatever they wanted on their 4th album, and label executives wouldn't enter the picture in any meaningful way until there was an album for them to listen to. The vast majority of the money a label spent on an album went into marketing and distribution. Only a small fraction went into recording. Also, contrary to what Freddie asserts in this scene over the course of his bloviating wank about the conceptual framework of A Night at the Opera, the album is not a concept album, nor is it in any way operatic, and it's called A Night at the Opera because Queen watched a Marx Brothers movie called A Night at the Opera during recording sessions. I'm not going to discuss Bohemian Rhapsody's atrocious editing, as that has been well documented, but there is one scene in the movie that has the most random, meaningless cut that I have to point out.
Oh, that's really good.
Why is there a cut mid-sentence here? This can't be a perspective shift because there's no one in the room with him. The background is bland, so there's no symbolic visual. This cut is completely pointless and distracting.
The Oscar goes to Bohemian Rhapsody, John Ottman.
Bohemian Rhapsody attempts to mythologize the creation of its namesake song. It does this by having Rami Malek pull cringy faces while scribbling down lyrics. I will give the filmmakers credit though. They do a brilliant job of communicating that the lyrics Freddie has come up with are really good.
Oh, that's really good.
This is the lowest effort attempt I have ever seen to capture the creative process. Let's contrast this scene with a few good examples of cinematic portrayal of the creative process. The greatest example comes from Amadeus. A dying Mozart dictates his requiem to Salieri, who is transcribing it for him. Salieri is unable to grasp Mozart's arrangement, and Mozart has to explain it to him.
It goes with the harmony. Yes, yes, yes.
Amadeus contains another great scene in which Mozart improves on a piano piece written by Salieri.
The rest is just the same, isn't it? It doesn't really work, does it? Better? What do you think?
By the way, this scene is lore accurate. Mozart toured Europe as a boy, often giving private performances at the house parties of aristocrats late into the night. One of his famous party tricks was to improvise a piece of music based on an original theme given to him by a party guest. By all accounts, Mozart's improvisation skills were mesmerizing. Another good depiction of the creative process is a scene from the one and only season of Vinyl.
Oh, fuck this, there's no more notes.
You serious?
Yeah, I'm fucking serious. We tried every progression, we're dry, man.
Here, the band is actually struggling to write a good song, so their manager gives them a lesson in the basics of chord progression.
Take me by my little hand.
goon like this, maybe you dirty it up. Tell me what I say.
This scene shows the frustration of artistic creation and includes the one genius songwriting trick that made Taylor Swift a billionaire.
E. A. B.
The cancellation of vinyl was a fucking crime, man. You know we're living in worst timeline when dog fuck like Bohemian Shite City makes $1 billion and vinyl gets cancelled. Presenting the creative process in a cinematically compelling manner can be done, but such a presentation requires creativity, which Bohemian Rhapsody does not possess. So instead... Bohemian Rhapsody took Queen 3 weeks to record across 5 separate studios. So in the movie, they record the song at the farm studio in an afternoon, then bring the master mix to Phil Moneyberg. Phil says, "But I don't understand it, it's longer than 3 minutes. How can a piece of music be longer than 3 minutes? It doesn't make sense, and I can't even understand what it's about because I'm an idiot. We should release the song about the car. I like cars." Phil Moneyberg is a strawman character. His job is to provide a contrast against which Queen's genius will shine all the brighter. Phil complains about the length of Bohemian Rhapsody, asserting that the standard for a single is 3 minutes, and no song over 3 minutes could possibly ever have any chance at commercial success. The least interesting aspect of Bohemian Rhapsody, the song, is its length. Fuck, I hate that I have to differentiate between the masterpiece song and this trash movie. But this is all the movie seems to want to focus on here, presenting Bohemian Rhapsody as a radical departure from traditional commercial song length, a daring masterwork of innovation that pushed the boundaries of what is commercially viable. But this is complete bullshit. Band on the Run, released in 1973, was a huge hit. The song is over 5 minutes long. American Pie, released in 1971, is over 8 minutes. Bridge Over Troubled Water, 1970, 5 minutes long. Hey Jude is one of the most successful songs ever released. It went to #1 in every country worth mentioning. It was released in 1968 and is over 7 minutes long. Like a Rolling Stone was a massive hit. It reached #2 in the US. It's longer than Bohemian Rhapsody and came out a decade before. Interesting fact, Bob Dylan's first #1 US song was Murder Most Foul, released in 2020. Murder Most Foul is one of the best songs of the 21st century. It's 17 minutes long. I'm not bloody releasing Bohemian Rhapsody because it's longer than 3 minutes, and I'm a wanker and you're all geniuses. So the band storm off in a tiff. Audiences understand that some dramatization is to be expected in a biopic. There will be occasional dramatic license, but Bohemian Rhapsody crosses the line into pure fiction. The filmmakers create a character that never even existed, so that Queen's genius will contrast against his philistinism. It's lazy as hell writing, and it's so fucking lame. The next scene shows Freddie handing the new record to a DJ, and the DJ's mind is fucking blown when Freddie tells him,
"It's 6 minutes long."
6 minutes?
Oh my god, a song longer than 3 minutes, but this is 1975. No one has ever dared venture into such daring musical territory. After a pointless touring montage, there's more historical distortion.
I think I'm bisexual.
Freddie, you okay?
Freddie Mercury was not gay. He had sexual relationships with men and women throughout his life. And the woman telling Freddie he's gay in this scene, Mary Austin, can personally testify to the fact that Freddie wasn't gay because she was fucking him for 6 years. Douglas Murray points out that modern Western society has a double standard in how it treats bisexual men. If a man who has exclusively dated women has a sudden sexual encounter with a man, society will congratulate him for finally accepting his true gay self, for bravely refusing to hide away from his gay identity as a gay man. If a man who has only ever had sexual encounters with men suddenly enters a sexual relationship with a woman, he will be scolded for denying his homosexual. He's a self-hating gay. He's lying to himself. He's living a lie. He's gay, but he can't accept it. This is exactly what Bohemian Rhapsody is doing in this scene, applying the double standard to Freddie Mercury and making a far bigger deal of Freddie's sexuality than Freddie himself ever did. Also, the scene is boring and cringe, but Love of My Life is playing in the background, which makes it amazing. Shortly after this, there's another boring as fuck Freddie and Mary scene, but it's different because it's 1980 now.
It is now 1980.
There hasn't been enough domestic drama in this movie so far, and biopics have domestic drama, so Queen have an argument at one of Freddie's parties. Littlefinger tells Freddie that if Freddie goes solo, he can become king of the Seven Kingdoms if he agrees to betray the other 3 members of Queen to Joffrey. The movie pushes the myth that when a band member does a solo project, that means the band is breaking up. In reality, Roger Taylor released 2 solo albums before Freddie. George Harrison released 2 solo albums while a member of the Beatles. John Lennon released 3 experimental albums with Yoko Ono while a member of the Beatles. When Freddie went off to do a solo album, the other members of Queen dealt with it by not caring. They were quite happy to take a break after years of touring. So there's yet another shitty montage showing the trappings of the rockstar lifestyle while a brilliant Queen song plays over the top of it in order to fool the viewers into thinking this movie isn't complete shite. This movie is a biopic and the main character has a public crash out in biopics, so Freddie has a public crash out. By the way, the album Queen are marketing in this scene, Hot Space, is my favourite Queen album. Sonically unique from the rest of their work. Highly underrated. The movie checks a few more tropes off the list in the scenes that follow. The band have a fight, the lead character gets egomania. Oh fuck, another Mary scene. Despite being tropier than a Starbucks barista with earplugs, a hipster beard, and a sleeve tattoo, Bohemian Rhapsody could have been watchable slop if the filmmakers had nailed the pacing, and they didn't even come close. The pacing is atrocious. Every single time the movie builds up anything like momentum, there's a dreary, fucking tedious Freddie and Mary scene which goes on far too long and brings the movie to a crashing halt. For example, near the end of the second act, there's a sequence which goes, band argument, montage of Freddie recording his solo album, Freddie's first AIDS scare, then a 6-minute long talkathon between Freddie and Mary. The movie should have maintained pacing and gone frenetic. The sequence can climax with Freddie collapsing after an all-night drug-fueled binge or something. Then the respite scene with slower pacing and no more Mary. Please, this subplot is such a fucking drag. It's so boring. Baz Luhrmann's Elvis has superb pacing and perfectly demonstrates how to do dramatic rise and fall. More on that later in the video. Bohemian Rhapsody is a music biopic, and in music biopics, the lead character cleans up his act after a period of degeneracy. So Freddie cleans up his act after a period of degeneracy. Then the prodigal son trope, actually 2 prodigal son tropes. Then a huge moment before Live Aid when Freddie informs the band that he has something to tell them and proceeds to confess that he has a love of opera. In reality, the band found out about Freddie's affinity for opera in 1989, not 1985. The rest of this steaming shit pile is a recreation of Queen's Live Aid performance, a pointless clone of the original. Phil Moneyberg makes a brief appearance when Freddie sings "No Time for Losers" during We Are the Champions, a subtle hint that Phil is a loser and he was wrong and Queen were right, and he's a Philistine and Queen are geniuses. Despite being a multi-millionaire record executive, Phil still lives in a chair behind a desk. Why is Phil in his office right now? Live Aid is the biggest live music event in British history. If he was a major record exec, he would be there. Don't Stop Me Now plays over the credits to hypnotize the audience into thinking the movie they just watched wasn't AIDS-ridden shit. And now it's time to talk about Rami Malek's performance as Freddie Mercury. In Bohemian Rhapsody, Rami Malek portrays Freddie Mercury over a 15-year period from 1970 to 1985, and throughout the film, his portrayal of Mercury never gets beyond the socially awkward, shy, lovesick, damaged boy cliche.
Mary knows me in a way that no one else ever will.
Compare Malek's two-dimensional caricature to the reality of Freddie Mercury in this 1984 interview, during which he is, appropriately enough, talking about the process of maturing over time.
What emotions do you have when you see old stuff, for example?
When I see myself?
Yes.
Oh dear, I want to tear them all up. I just think, I actually laugh at myself. But I know that it was something that you have to do. I don't regret any of the things I did. It's just that I laugh. I mean, what did you look like 10 years ago? And it's a process of growing up, you know, it's experience. And at this point in time, I think if I had long hair and fingernails and wearing the things, I would look ridiculous. I mean, I looked ridiculous then, but it worked. But it was all right then.
In the interview, Freddie Mercury is brimming with confidence, charm, and demonstrates a relaxed social intelligence, none of which is present in Malek's awkward performance. Malek's Mercury is withdrawn, unsure of himself and lacking in basic social skills, he completely fails to portray Freddie Mercury's maturation over time. Rami Malek's performance is a cartoonishly stupid caricature of Freddie Mercury. This is one of the few Oscar-winning performances that should have won a Razzie. In a post last month, I asked my subs, what is the worst biopic you've ever seen? My next video will include a review of the movie mentioned in the most upvoted comment. By far, the most voted for movie was Bohemian Rhapsody. Ridley Scott's Napoleon came a distant second. Ridley Scott's Napoleon is the worst biopic of the 20s so far, but I won't be covering it in this video because I already made a 1 hour, 41 minute long video going over both the theatrical release and the director's cut in detail. The link is in the description. Whatever reputation Bohemian Rhapsody once had is long gone. The movie is now regarded, rightfully, as one of the worst biopics ever made. It appears on almost every worst music biopics list. A Vulture article from December 2024 lists Bohemian Rhapsody as the worst music biopic ever made. Bohemian Rhapsody is hated not only because it is a god-awful movie, but also because of its undeserved success. The movie is the most commercially successful music biopic of all time. It made almost $1 billion at the box office. It won 2 of the worst Oscars ever awarded, Best Actor for Rami Malek and Best Film Editing. Bohemian Rhapsody is one of the very few films that is infamous for its terrible editing. For details, see YouTuber Thomas Flight's excellent video, Bohemian Rhapsody's Terrible Editing, a breakdown. Predictably, a slew of shite followed in the wake of Bohemian Rhapsody's success, hoping to cash in now that biopics were back, baby. Stardust, a David Bowie biopic, was released in 2020. It made $4 at the box office and received appalling scores from everyone who suffered through it. Like Nina, Stardust didn't have permission to use Bowie's songs, so Bowie just performs covers throughout the movie. Bob Marley One Love had been floating around Paramount as a maybe project since 2018, but was greenlit immediately after Bohemian Rhapsody's success and excreted into theaters in 2024. Bob Marley One Love is oppressively boring. This movie could bore the gay out of Harvey Milk. If you played this movie in a graveyard, the dead would rise to turn it off. I saw Bob Marley One Love in the cinema, and throughout the entire runtime, I felt only 2 emotions: boredom and the desire to walk out. I will never subject myself to another second of that dreck. But there are 2 aspects of Bob Marley One Love I want to discuss: whitewashing and the movie's attempt to iconize the Exodus album cover. The movie whitewashes Bob Marley, who is portrayed as a loving father in a monogamous marriage. In reality, Marley fathered at least 11 children by various women, and according to his wife Rita, he had no interest in his kids. He spent his time at home shagging groupies, getting stoned, and playing football with his many arslicks, who were forever buzzing round him like flies around shite. For some reason, the filmmakers decided to pretend that the Exodus album cover is iconic. An entire scene is dedicated solely to discussing the details of the cover. Phil Moneyberg even makes an appearance and says something to the effect of, "But I don't understand, Bob. You're just so much more enlightened than I am. I can't possibly be expected to understand the visual genius of this design that came from your incredible mind because I'm a Philistine. Why don't we do something more formulaic? I like formulas." But Bob is having none of it and decides to stick with this. A badly dated pseudo-African font over a monotone shit brown background. No one thinks the Exodus album cover is iconic. Type iconic album covers into Google Images and scroll as long as you like. You will not see Exodus. That's all I have to say about Bob Marley One Love. This movie is a live-action sleeping pill. The 2023 Priscilla Presley biopic, directed by Sofia Coppola, features a scene in which Priscilla tells her husband Elvis that she's leaving him.
I'm leaving our marriage.
Have I lost you to another man?
You're losing me to a life of my own.
This scene sums up so much of modern feminism. This woman is married to a millionaire, spending vast sums of his money. She's about to walk out the door with a considerable portion of his earthly wealth and will demand a vast annuity in the form of alimony and childcare payments. Yet she asserts that she's a strong, independent woman leading her own life. Before I offer my thoughts on Priscilla, I want to present the opinion of Elvis's daughter, who after reading the script wrote the following in an email to Sofia Coppola. The email exchange was later obtained and published by Variety. Quote, "My father only comes across as a predator and manipulative. As his daughter, I don't read this and see any of my father in this character. I don't read this and see my mother's perspective of my father. I read this and see your shockingly vengeful and contemptuous perspective, and I don't understand why." End quote. According to feminist dogma, behind every great man is a story of abuse to women waiting to be told. Priscilla is feminism's attempt to tell that story. The film portrays Elvis as a wastrel and a layabout. He's controlling, capricious, manipulative, predatory, bullying, and two-faced. His screen time is divided between lounging around, popping pills, watching TV, playing around with his hangers-on like an adolescent boy, fawning over Priscilla, occasionally threatening and bullying Priscilla, arguing with Priscilla, admiring himself, partying and sleeping in. In one scene, Priscilla comes home from school to find Elvis still in bed at 4 p.m. He comes off as the world's laziest superstar. In one scene, he complains that the movie scripts he's being sent are garbage and throws them angrily on the floor like a teenager in a huff. In another scene, he huffs around the music studio, complaining about the poor quality of songs submitted as candidates for his next album. He asks Priscilla what she thinks of the song. This is actually confusing as it's not clarified whether he means the song he is considering covering or his own demo.
Solo, what do you think?
I don't know if I like it. Something about it, a catchiness that it's missing.
Watch out!
The scene depicts Elvis as impatient, entitled, bullying, capricious, and lazy. Elvis's career happens off screen. The viewer never sees Elvis putting in the work that has earned him a life of luxury in a giant mansion. One almost gets the impression that Sofia Coppola has an agenda in her depiction of Elvis. I should point out that the film does not portray Elvis as a sexual predator. A 24-year-old Elvis courts a 14-year-old Priscilla, which is bad enough, but he doesn't have sex with her until much later, although the movie is vague on when the relationship was consummated. In fact, the movie shows Elvis rejecting Priscilla's demands for sex. Keep in mind that Sofia Coppola was not the sole perpetrator of this crime. The movie is based on Priscilla Presley's 1985 memoir, Elvis and Me, and Priscilla no doubt had her own public image in mind when she wrote the book. In fairness to the film and to Sofia Coppola, her direction is good. The movie looks and sounds great, the casting is perfect, Kaylee Spaney and Jacob Elordi are both excellent in the lead roles. The film is well edited and contains lots of clever, thematically relevant symbolism, though the symbolism is wasted on a thoroughly trite theme, the objectification of women by powerful men. The opening shot shows Priscilla's feet merging with the plush carpet as if swallowing her up. Another scene shows her trying on different outfits for the edification of Elvis, who rates each dress in turn. Elvis gifts Priscilla with different guns for different dresses, as if he's decorating a doll. He gives her pills to ensure that she can keep the same late hours as him, ignoring the consequences for her health and schoolwork. He forces her to dye her hair black and style it in the hideous fashion of the day. He complains when she walks in wearing a disgusting clown dress.
That doesn't suit you, baby. Oh man, there's nothing for your figure. All you see is a goddamn dress.
Finished?
In fairness to Elvis, he's not wrong. Her dress looks like it was made out of grandma's carpet and it billows out around her, making her look fat. It's fucking gross. By far the worst torture Elvis subjects his wife to is forcing her to listen to him read New Age spiritualist garbage, which was hip at the time.
Whose lamp of faith, no matter how dim at times, keeps steadily burning until somehow or somewhere...
I can't stand it!
If this scene is not an exaggeration, and Elvis did indeed force his wife to listen to and pay attention to this utter wank, then I'm sold. Mission accomplished feminism. The man was a monster. If only Elvis had done a spoken word album featuring him reading his favourite passages of pseudo-Eastern philosophy trash, the CIA would never have had to resort to waterboarding to get intel out of terrorists.
like a mine. Its purest gold may not be found on the surface. Its richest veins may only reward those who have the patience to toil for years.
One element of Sofia Coppola's direction sticks out like Harvey Milk's cock at a kindergarten sports day. The pacing. The pacing is solid and consistent for the first 2 acts, but the pacing falls apart horribly in the final act. Priscilla gives birth 1.5 hours into the movie, then the movie speeds quickly through a string of domestic non-events, and suddenly Elvis is in bed with a groupie. Cut to next scene, Priscilla is out with friends. Next scene, Elvis calls her to his bedroom, says he's going to make love to her like a real man. She brushes him off like an irksome gnat, and in the next scene she tells him she's leaving him. The sequence feels like a dizzying array of stuff that has to happen so the non-plot can stumble towards something resembling a conclusion. The final scene actually reminds me of the final scene from Gotti. It's obvious that the filmmakers had no idea how to close out Gotti, so they just had John Travolta stand in front of the camera and claim to be the Kwisatz Haderach. In Priscilla, she just drives out of Graceland while some stock love song that's been played to death hovers over the scene like a bad stench. I want to be very clear on this next point. Neither character assassination of Elvis, feminist agenda, nor pacing are the biggest problems with Priscilla, not even close. The biggest problem with Priscilla is that the movie is soul-crushingly boring. There is not a single memorable scene, no fun or interesting characters, no compelling conversations, no cool action sequences or musical performances, or anything. The vast majority of the runtime is dedicated to Priscilla hanging around looking bored. Priscilla is a feelings movie. The narrative is not action-driven, it is not goal-oriented, it is a meandering narrative designed to evoke Priscilla's feelings from one dreary scene to the next, and to emphasize that she is slowly becoming just one more object in Elvis's vast mansion of treasures. In one montage scene, she mills around the house pining for Elvis. In another montage, she spends several days in bed with Elvis, eating and watching TV. Exciting stuff, right? All we need now is the Rocky music. The movie never gives the viewer the sense that anything is happening or that the story is going somewhere. Rather, the narrative just lingers like Harvey Milk outside an elementary school. Then Priscilla leaves Elvis quite suddenly, and that's it. Another problem with Priscilla is that it's clearly a whitewash. Every breakup has 2 stories, as the Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp libel trial reminded us. Amber's story was that she was a heroic survivor of horrifying abuse at the hands of an abuser. Johnny Depp's story was reality.
You got hit. I'm sorry I hit you like this, but I did not punch you. I did not fucking deck you. I fucking was hitting you.
Priscilla is Priscilla's story, and Elvis is too dead to give his version of events. Throughout the movie, Priscilla does not commit a single morally questionable act. The strain in the relationship is entirely Elvis's fault. Priscilla is never anything other than a dutiful wife and a victim. As anyone who has ever been in a relationship can attest, that is a crock of shit. Sofia Coppola's eagerness to go along with Priscilla Presley's obviously self-promoting narrative causes another serious problem for the film. Priscilla becomes extremely boring. She is an overwhelmingly passive character. She doesn't drive the narrative, make decisions, make mistakes, take actions, or even form independent opinions. Watching nearly 2 hours of this passive feminist drivel spew out of my computer monitor was an ordeal that was genuinely difficult to get through. By the way, I have been listening to Elvis's debut album while redrafting this section of the script, and I can't even. My capacity to even has been canted. His self-titled debut is 70 years old and is still vastly superior to any of the slime that shows up on the charts these days. And I don't just mean the quality of the songs, singing, and musicianship. The sonic quality of this 1956 album is far better than the overproduced, overcompressed, auto-tuned, gridlocked slop that oozes out of Starbucks speakers in current year. We need to be fucking done with that soulless, plastic-sounding manufactured shite and get back to proper fucking fucking rock and roll. Right! Priscilla received predictable but mild praise from critics who were politically obliged to endorse it, and indifference from audiences. The movie flopped, making $33 million on a $20 million budget, and was completely overshadowed by Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, which came out the previous year. Elvis was a big hit. Audiences loved it, and it earned almost $300 million at the box office on an $85 million budget. I'm lukewarm on Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. I regard the movie as the best of the worst. That is, the best movie in the worst genre. Music biopics told in the greatest hits format. Elvis stands atop a mountain of trash that reeks with the cadaverous odors of Ray, Walk the Line, Nina, Bohemian Rhapsody, Maestro, Bob Marley One Love, Back to Black, among many others. And Rocket Man. Yes, Rocket Man is shit, but not terrible. I mean, fuck man, it's not Bohemian Rhapsody.
Freddie fucking Mercury. 4
elements elevate Baz Luhrmann's Elvis above the usual live-action Wikipedia page piss. 1. Story perspective. The movie is narrated by and told from the perspective of Elvis's parasitic manager, the Colonel. A nice change from the usual first-person subject bilge. 2. An incredible performance by Austin Butler in the titular role. 3. A bizarre, grotesque, and shockingly awful performance as the Colonel by Tom Hanks. Hanks' performance as the Colonel is so surreal that it transcends criticism, but his performance matches perfectly with Baz Luhrmann's ultra-gaudy, hyper-realist, massively over-the-top aesthetic. And 4. Luhrmann's superb direction. Baz Luhrmann takes a tired genre, pumps it full of pills, crazy musical numbers, many lights, many cameras, and many action. Elvis is Rocket Man with all the tedious, pity-party bollocks tossed right the fuck out and replaced with a generous, healthy portion of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, then shot full of steroids and thrown on stage with a 90-piece orchestra, a fireworks display, and a side order of LSD. Elvis isn't a great movie, but it is a great time, and as a lovely bonus, the movie fucking curb-stomped Priscilla.
Put your fucking mouth on the curb.
Go on, man.
Put it on the curb right now. Now say goodnight.
And now we move on to the worst movie of 2022, Blonde. Blonde was the worst movie of 2022. That is not an opinion, that is a fact. It was my personal pick for Worst of the Year, and it won the Razzies for Worst Movie and Worst Screenplay. The level of boredom Blonde is able to inflict on a viewer is genuinely impressive. It took me 8 sittings to get through. William Shakespeare would struggle to find the words to adequately communicate how boring Blonde is. So instead of relying on the inadequate medium of language, I have prepared a presentation which I think will allow you to begin to comprehend the effect that Blonde will have on the average viewer. Karen, iPhone, roll it. Blonde is based on a novel of the same name released in 2000. The author of the novel described her book as a work of fiction that should not be regarded as autobiographical. Unlike the book, the movie never makes reference to itself as a work of fiction because Netflix knew Blonde would attract a larger audience if presented as a true-to-life biopic. So many admirers of Marilyn Monroe who watched the movie find themselves asking,
what the fuck is this piece of shit?
Blonde explores Marilyn Monroe's relationship with her mother, her throuple with Charlie Chaplin's sons, her second marriage to some guy, her third marriage to Arthur Miller, and a blowjob she gave to JFK, one of the most cringe-inducing, ghastly scenes ever filmed. Much of Blonde's first act is dedicated to communicating Marilyn's mommy and daddy issues. The first 15 minutes of runtime is entirely focused on Marilyn's childhood. In biopics, a childhood segment is included for one of 2 reasons: the Child of Destiny trope, of which more in a bit, or the childhood trauma trope, the depiction of traumatic childhood events that shape the subject's psychology, the result of boomer pop psychology infesting popular entertainment. Blonde does the childhood trauma trope. Having subjected myself to 16 movies in the making of this video, and having seen many other biopics besides, here is an absolute truth that I have learned about biopics. Portraying the subject's childhood is always a bad idea. There are two exceptions which test and thus prove the validity of this rule: Amadeus and My Left Foot. Amadeus dedicates a tiny fraction of screen time to Mozart's childhood. Child Mozart himself does not speak. The purpose of these few scenes are to present the Child of Destiny trope, which is used well in Amadeus and badly in all other cases. Alexander does the Child of Destiny trope, and it's a cringe-inducing waste of screen time. The 2024 biopic Reagan also does Child of Destiny, and it is easily the most horrifying example of the trope.
Then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land.
But more on that later in the video. The My Left Foot childhood sequence works because the purpose of the movie is to show a man overcoming a debilitating disability he was born with. Childhood sequences are the Maginot Line of biopics. A victory can only be achieved if it is bypassed altogether, though tiny feints can be made toward it to draw the enemy's attention away from the main attack. Blonde's childhood sequence is the equivalent of a massed frontal assault on the Maginot Line, and the results are predictable. Blonde's childhood sequence is absolutely fucking miserable. 15 minutes of the filmmaker depressing the shit out of the audience so that everyone knows how traumatized Marilyn is and how big a role mommy and daddy issues will play in her life. During this sequence, Marilyn's mother convinces Marilyn that her father is a big movie star who will come for her one day, a promise which Marilyn takes to heart. Marilyn's mother tries to murder her twice, once by driving into a forest fire and once by attempting to drown her, a scene which I will not show in this video because unlike Andrew Dominik, the director of Blonde, I am aware that an insane woman attempting to drown her pre-adolescent daughter is something my viewers don't need nor want to see. The childhood sequence sets the tone for this entire 2-hour, 40-minute long slog. Sheer misery. Even if you enjoy tragedies, you still won't like Blonde because the movie is too one-note. The Virgin Suicides is one of the most depressing and tragic movies ever made, but it still has moments of levity and humor. But Blonde is just a tsunami of horrible, depressing shit without remit. In case you didn't get the message that Marilyn has daddy issues, the first word out of adult Marilyn's mouth is Daddy. And in order that you clearly grasp Blonde's subtle theme that Marilyn Monroe was sexually objectified by men, in adult Marilyn's opening sequence, the camera focuses on her arse as she enters a room full of men glaring hungrily at her. And just to make sure you understand Blonde's subtle theme that Marilyn Monroe was preyed upon by men, she gets fucked in a casting couch scene a few seconds later. The camera work is about as subtle as the themes. Marilyn is cast in the movie she auditioned for after the producer fucks her, but she doesn't understand why because she's just a helpless victim without agency. We know this because she says, I don't understand. I'm not going to bother with Blonde's historical inaccuracies, but I will say that this ridiculous caricature that Ana de Armas is portraying bears little resemblance to Marilyn Monroe. Monroe was an astute businesswoman. She founded her own production company in 1954, which gave her more creative freedom and a far higher salary for her roles. The casting couch is portrayed in Blonde as a weapon of male predation. In reality, the casting couch is a transactional tool which is just as much a creation of female avarice as it is male desire. In a very telling interview, Andrew Dominik spoke about his motivation for making Blonde. Quote, "It's a different thing for me to do. The main character is female. My films are fairly bereft of women and now I'm imagining what it's like to be one." Evidently, Dominik imagines that being a woman means existing in a state of constant victimhood and being forever preyed upon by men. In case you still don't quite fully comprehend Blonde's subtle theme that Marilyn was preyed upon by men, a greasy exec grabs her leg during a movie premiere. Blonde's cinematography jumps randomly between colour and black and white because this movie is brilliant and profound, and you're a Philistine if you disagree. Blonde is a masterpiece of Bradley Cooperist cinema. You just don't get it. So Marilyn does an audition and...
Look at the ass on that little girl.
This scene helps to communicate Blonde's subtle theme that Marilyn was objectified by men! Despite the attempted murder of a child, a traumatized Marilyn screaming her head off, and constant sexual predation, Blonde isn't quite depressing enough yet, so the script makes Marilyn visit her mother in a mental asylum. Marilyn hasn't seen her in 10 years, and she finds that her mother is in a semi-catatonic state and does not recognize Marilyn as her daughter. Jesus Christ, man. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was depressing, but at least it had a few good laughs.
Play the game, Hardy.
What are you talking about? I am playing the game.
Well, play the game.
Leave me alone. I ain't doing anything to you. What bullshit?
Your bullshit.
What about your bullshit?
Come on, play the game.
In case you're still not getting Blonde's subtle theme, that Marilyn was sexually objectified by men! Marilyn walks into the LA Actors Circle headquarters to find that her famous nude pinup has been pinned to the notice board by men who frequent the premises. After being seduced by Charlie Chaplin's son, Ana de Armas gets her tits out for the first of many occasions, so that the lads can admire them. Do you know why she does this? Do you get the thematic relevance of this scene? No? Well then I'll tell you. This scene communicates the subtle theme, brilliantly interwoven into the narrative, that Marilyn was sexually objectified by men! By the way, Ana de Armas has excellent tits, but even they are not enough to make this crime against art worth your time. Some critics accused Blonde of being exploitative and pornographic, but such Philistines were incapable of seeing the deeper nuances embedded within a masterful cinematic language that simultaneously evokes truth and nobility. So in the next scene, Marilyn gets fucked in a threesome with the Chaplin brothers, then they finger her in a public movie theater while watching one of her movies. So the Chaplin brothers get Marilyn pregnant, yes, both of them, and Marilyn is so happy, and the baby is shown growing inside Marilyn so that you will be even more miserable when she eventually aborts it under pressure from her studio. This concludes her relationship with the Chaplin brothers, but Marilyn can't exist outside the predatory gaze of men, so she needs a new man in her life. Enter that guy from Vinyl. The condescending view Blonde takes of Marilyn Monroe is encapsulated in this scene.
That thing up on the screen, it isn't me.
The movie attempts to present Marilyn as a kind of Hollywood hostage, a marionette controlled by predatory men, rather than an active, willing, powerful participant in an industry that is bringing her vast wealth and status. Marilyn and the guy from Vinyl get married, and he's a man, so a few minutes later he starts beating her. At the 1.5 hour mark, bear in mind, we are barely halfway through this monstrosity, the iconic billowing dress scene is updated for a modern audience. As she makes cinema history, Marilyn is surrounded by horny, pervy, creepy, leering, jeering, cheering men. The camera zooms out to reveal that the men are in fact a vast swarm, like that swarm of arachnids from Starship Troopers, ready to swarm her and tear her limb from limb in an orgy of ravenous lust. This scene emphasizes Blonde's subtle theme that Marilyn Monroe was sexually objectified by men! That guy from Vinyl gives Marilyn another beating because men. Then we jump ahead to 1955. She's freshly divorced and she meets Arthur Miller, her third husband. It's necessary for the movie to jump ahead to Marilyn's next man because Marilyn couldn't exist outside of the male gaze. Arthur gets Marilyn pregnant and the fetus starts having conversations with her.
You won't hurt me this time, will you? Not do what you did the last time?
The film does this so that the small portion of the audience that have made it this far into the movie will feel even more depressed, miserable, sad, and upset when Marilyn loses the baby in a miscarriage. Blonde is misery porn. There's another hour of runtime I could go through, including the blowjob mourned around the world, but I am not subjecting myself to any more of this. If in a past life I was a lieutenant of Timur and annihilated entire populations on his orders, I have more than paid for my crimes by rewatching Blonde up to this point. Blonde got pathetically low scores from audiences and critics. The movie received 6 Razzie nominations: Worst Picture, Worst Director, Worst Supporting Actor for the guys that played the Chaplin brothers, Worst Screenplay, Worst Remake, Ripoff or Sequel, and Worst Screen Combo, those being Andrew Dominik and his issues with women, and both real-life characters in the fallacious White House bedroom scene. I am proud to say that I walked out of Maestro, Bradley Cooper's snivelling Oscar bait Leonard Bernstein biopic, released in 2023. Maestro is possibly the most pretentious autofellationnary film ever made. Narratively, the movie consists of obscure, boring episodes from Leonard Bernstein's professional and domestic life. Much of the movie is filmed in wide shots that hold for obscene lengths of time. Some scenes consist entirely of a single stationary shot. Bradley Cooper filmed it like this because he's a visionary genius, and visionary geniuses do weird shit that Philistines like you and me can't understand. If you have ever heard a movie criticized on the basis that it insists upon itself, but we're never quite sure what that meant, watch Maestro for 5 minutes and you will understand. This wank fest spends 2 hours insisting upon itself. Bradley Cooper completely fails to capture Bernstein's intense intellectual and artistic self-possession. Cooper's caricature of Bernstein comes off as ridiculously prim, snobbish, and poncy. He flounces around like an emotionally incontinent pansy when with other people, and indulges in tedious introspection when by himself. Cooper is far too focused on capturing Bernstein's behavioral idiosyncrasies, which he exaggerates to a cartoonish degree. By squandering his performance on Bernstein's surface-level traits, Cooper neglects to convey the essence of Bernstein. A viewer who knows little of Leonard Bernstein will be left with the impression that Bernstein was an effeminate bohemian artist type, a run-of-the-mill wannabe whose main priorities in life were accumulating adulation and pursuing hedonism, a mediocrity who happened to make it. The profound depth of Bernstein's understanding of music and musicians is absent from Maestro, as is his assertive personality.
But if you invent something, the reason to stop, which covers up the truth, they are also very sensitive. We all get it, we kids down here.
No, when I mix
we know when you're bullshitting us.
The movie isn't intended to showcase Bernstein's genius, it's intended to showcase Bradley Cooper's genius, which Bradley Cooper does not possess. He's a good actor, but he's not even close to as talented as he clearly likes to imagine. The last I ever saw of Maestro was Carey Mulligan's giant poncy face projected on a cinema screen, screeching at the theatre through the speakers about how much she deserves an Oscar. I promised myself then that I would never watch another minute of this filth. I intend to keep that promise. So the rest of the Maestro section of this video will consist of a review of the movie I included in my Damsel video. Enjoy! Before I continue my review of Scum, I want to take a few minutes to celebrate the complete failure of Maestro. Bradley Cooper's wanky Oscar bait trash won nothing at the Oscars and Golden Globes. It didn't even win any BAFTAs. Sorry your homecoming triumph didn't go as planned, Carrie.
Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you!
Before walking out of Maestro, I was so bored in the theatre that I started looking round to see if anyone else was as checked out of this wank as I was. Sure enough, the old woman behind me had fallen asleep. She was lucky. I personally found Bradley Cooper's ridiculous, excessively nasal vocal imitation of Leonard Bernstein to be too grating to sleep through.
Julie Vegas swears that she's at the top of the stairs every morning when she comes down to do the laundry.
In reality, Leonard Bernstein did not sound like a ponce with a persistent cold.
This is the most fascinating ambiguity of all, that as each of us grows up, the mark of our maturity is that we learn to accept our mortality.
Making sure she's separating the whites and the darks. And our children are very jealous because they've never seen her.
Particularly satisfying was seeing the villain Bradley Cooper lose Best Actor to Cillian Murphy. Cooper had the previous year publicly expressed his contempt for Cillian Murphy because Cillian only took 6 months to prepare for his Oppenheimer role, whereas he, Bradley Cooper, the anointed, a true auteur, spent years preparing for his big role.
This wasn't like you got a call and then
no, yeah,
you're going to do it.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
like this had to have taken years.
Oppenheimer made almost $1 billion at the box office, while Maestro made less than $1 million on a budget of $80 million. Now, Maestro was made for Netflix and only given a limited run in theaters in order to qualify for the many awards it didn't win. But even for a limited run, a box office haul of $820,000 is monumentally pathetic. Women Talking, which was recently voted the worst movie ever to win an Oscar by myself, Echo Chamberlain, and Greg Owen. So Women Talking is officially the worst Oscar win of all time. Someone please inform Sarah Polley.
Excellent.
Made $9 million on a limited release. The Zone of Interest, a movie about the banal domestic life of the family of Rudolf Höss, the commandant of Auschwitz, made $24 million on a limited release. Past Lives, a movie which can be most generously described as pleasant background noise to an afternoon nap, was made on a budget of $12 million and made $40 million on what was initially a limited release. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which looks like it was thrown together at the last minute by a third-rate film studies freshman and which deservedly won a Razzie for Worst Movie, made $5.2 million. Maestro, an $80 million Netflix production starring Bradley Cooper and Carrie Give Me an Oscar Mulligan, made $800,000 in change. Hey, you know what? Let me show you something. Here's a picture of a dumpy little house in Toronto. If you took all the money that Maestro made at the box office, not profit now, just total revenue, you still wouldn't be able to buy that house. If you divided all the money that Maestro made at the box office between all of Walmart's employees, each employee would get 35 cents. In 2023, 3,319,000 Americans made more money than Maestro. Here is a picture of a $10 kids watch. If you took all the BAFTAs, Golden Globes, and Academy Awards that Maestro won and sold them, you still wouldn't have enough money to buy that watch.
You can't afford this. You can't afford this watch.
Needless to say, Maestro didn't attract many subs to Netflix. Maestro didn't just fail, it failed so spectacularly that I honestly don't think the failure is replicable. If you gave me $80 million and told me to make a movie that would generate less than the cost of a dog kennel in Toronto, I don't think I could do that, but Bradley Cooper did it. With Maestro, he achieved a level of critical and commercial failure that is literally unsurpassable. No movie could win less Oscars, attract fewer subscribers to Netflix, or make less money than Maestro. It is truly a masterpiece of failure. Hey, wanna hear a joke? What do One Direction and Bradley Cooper's boring piece of shit Oscar bait movie Maestro have in common? They both produced 5 zeros.
What do Bradley Cooper, Carrie Mulligan and the Haitian warlord Jimmy Barbecue have in common? None of them have an Oscar.
Fuck you! Get the fuck out of here! Fuck you, man! Get the fuck out!
While you're telling jokes, Karen iPhone, you may as well toss in that one about the Flash that you would have cracked at the Worst of Woke Awards had you thought of it in time.
My favorite part of The Flash was when Ezra Miller arrived at a children's playground wearing nothing but a beige raincoat, said, "It's flashing time," and proceeded to pull out.
I tell you what, since I'm trying to make the word fantasy a thing, here's another neologism. Bradley Cooperism, meaning a school of filmmaking in which the goal is to make a masterful work of innovative, critic-pleasing cinema, but which results in a piece of garbage movie that's so bad that it would give shit cancer, that checks every Oscar bait trope box it can while also boring its laughably small audience to sleep. Then the piece of shit movie bombs and no one cares, because no one saw it. And then it doesn't win any awards because even the fart-sniffing wankers in Hollywood couldn't risk their reputation by pretending to like such abysmal fucking dross. I admit this new word might not stick, but hey, just throwing it out there. Right, now, oh, for fuck's sake, do I have to go back to talking about that stupid fucking dragon movie with Millie Bobby Brown? I was enjoying sticking the boot into Maestro Betro. You never can kick a villain too hard when he's down. Maestro is the spirit brother of Blonde. Both are biopics that choose pretentious titles over being named after the individual portrayed. Both jump between colour and black and white. Both have vintage aspect ratios because the director is a visionary genius. Both are clearly Oscar bait. Both are primarily concerned with the sexuality of the subject to the detriment of more interesting aspects of the subject's life that a viewer might actually care about. Both are brutally boring. Both are punishingly long. Both are atrociously directed. Both are Netflix originals. They were released within a year of each other. Both flopped with audiences, and both were award-winning movies. Blonde won Worst Picture and Worst Screenplay at the Razzies, and Bradley Cooper won Awards Season Villain Award at the 2024 Worst of Woke Awards.
So your question, yes, I carry her around with me quite a bit. I've often seen her in the garden.
Back to Black is yet another thoroughly mediocre entry into the slag heap of forgotten biopics. The movie does have a few redeeming features, an excellent performance from Jack O'Connell as Amy's husband, whose star has risen considerably following his performance as Remick in Sinners. The girl who plays Amy Winehouse, I couldn't be bothered looking up her name, is also good. The scene in which Amy meets Jack in a bar is excellent, easily the best in the movie, and there's a funny scene in which Jack and Amy celebrate their elopement by eating McDonald's and smoking crack.
For me. You shouldn't have.
For us.
The plot mostly muddles through Amy and Jack's relationship from when they meet in a pub to when they break up in a prison meeting room. Their highs, their lows, the good, the bad, the crack, and the crack pipe. Most of the remaining screen time is dedicated to Amy's alcoholism and her hounding by the gutter press. I actually remember Amy Winehouse being in the papers all the fucking time in the 2000s. If you picked up a copy of The Sun or the Daily Mail on a random day of the week in the mid-2000s, you were likely to come across photos and articles detailing Amy's self-destructive lifestyle. Audiences disliked Back to Black because it dedicates so much attention to Amy's marriage and lifestyle that almost no time is left to examine her music career. The first act is typical music biopic silage. She plays a few local gigs, gets signed, has a minor hit, has a public crash out following some constructive criticism from her label. So far, so seen it a million times. But 25 minutes in, the plot completely derails from her music career and focuses almost entirely on her romantic life and alcoholism. After she meets Jack, there are very few scenes of her performing, recording, or writing music, and when she does do a big performance, she's thinking about Jack the whole time. Back to Black is basically a fairly boring romantic tragedy. Back to Black does leave just enough space to fit in a handful of mouldy old biopic tropes: the public crash out, domestic drama, the montage with the artist's most popular song playing over the top, hitting bottom, the prodigal daughter, getting clean, the comeback concert, and the fade to black followed by a wall of text briefly detailing what happened after the movie. The relative absence of Amy's career development in Back to Black doesn't particularly bother me. I watched Big George Foreman. I don't need to see another live-action Wikipedia page. I don't need to see Amy go from playing a local pub to a sold-out stadium over the course of a 5-minute montage. I don't need to see her arguing with her studio band while recording an album, and I don't need to see the inevitable Phil Moneyberg scene. Your songs sound like they're from the 50s, Amy. It's not what the kids are into these days, and it doesn't even make sense. Back to Black? What does that mean? Black's a colour, not a location. Why don't you do a nice pop tune? Like Taylor Swift. I like Taylor Swift. This stuff you're writing, the audience can't connect with it. How fucking dare you say the audience can't connect with my songs? I'll never release those songs on my label because you're a visionary genius and I'm a fucking idiot. So write something else. I'll never abandon my songs. Fuck you. But normies, especially Amy Winehouse fans, expected to see a lot of her career depicted in this movie, and they were understandably disappointed when they instead got a trashy, slightly voyeuristic, slightly rom-com, down in the dumps tragedy. Some viewers were annoyed that Amy's death wasn't depicted in the movie, as they felt this robbed them of the dramatic climax they'd stuck around for. The movie doesn't even depict the aftermath of her death. The movie just ends with Amy milling around her house. The movie also lies at the end, claiming she died from alcohol poisoning following a long period of sobriety. Here is a BBC article published 1 month before Amy Winehouse died. Amy Winehouse too drunk to sing in Belgrade concert? Here's an excerpt from an independent article detailing the concert because it's funnier than the BBC article. Nearly half the agonising 71-minute show consisted of an attempt to introduce the members of her bemused band, which appeared to be stymied by her inability to remember their names. She was likewise unclear about her location, first greeting the audience in Athens, and then in New York. The anger of the crowd, which had waited patiently in Belgrade's 34°C heat until 11 p.m. for Winehouse to perform, was clearly visible. Some 3,000 had come from neighbouring Bosnia, Croatia, Hungary and Macedonia to see the star. She promised to sing some new songs in Belgrade, said Macedonian Emil Vlaskovsky, 24. But God, she could not sing the old ones or remain on her feet. By the way, I saw Amy Winehouse perform at the Oxygen Music Festival in Ireland, which I was working at in 2008. She was good. I met some American music festival tourists there who had been to dozens of music festivals and told me that Oxygen was the dirtiest festival they had ever been to. I still remember walking around on the final day, searching in vain for a porta potty that wasn't overflowing with shit. Come to think of it, those porta potties remind me of the biopic genre. Oxygen was discontinued a few years later. The last festival was in 2013. Back to Black was a hard flop, earning $51 million on a $30 million budget.
America, America, fuck yeah! Come out again to save the motherfucking day, yeah!
Here is a scene from the 2024 Ronald Reagan blowjobography, Reagan, which I think sums up the movie fairly well.
The Crusader took it all in stride.
We can match you on land.
Hearing it for what it was.
Gorbachev is speaking, his translator is translating for him, and the narrator of the movie, some KGB guy, is speaking over the top of the conversation. This scene is an incomprehensible mess. It is one of the worst pieces of editing I have ever seen, but that doesn't matter. All that matters is that you understand how impressive Ronald Reagan was and how amazed the Russians were to be in his orbit.
We found ourselves already at a disadvantage, as the president looked better than the general secretary.
Note, to avoid confusion between the 40th President of the United States and the movie that bears his name, I will be referring to the movie as Reagan 24. I'm going to be offering almost no praise to Reagan, so before I launch into my criticism, I do want to commend the filmmakers for their excellent work in clarifying what a contract is.
A contract is a contract.
Reagan 24 was in development hell for almost 15 years. It was announced in 2010. The movie was intended as a response to the 2003 miniseries The Reagans, which was criticized by conservatives as leftist historical distortion. Difficulty securing financing delayed the film, and when principal photography finally got going in 2020, it was delayed again by COVID. Reagan is a remake of the 2013 movie Jobs, though a few prosthetic changes have been made. Steve Jobs is now referred to as Ronald Reagan. Next product is now known as the American Dream. Apple are the Republicans, Microsoft are communism, and the Macintosh has been renamed the Iran-Contra affair. Everything else is the same. The greatest hits format, inspiring speeches accompanied by inspiring music, large crowds materializing to listen to those speeches, 25 years of aging represented by a slightly different haircut, total absence of historical context, characters popping in and out of existence, genre tropes, cheesy needle drops, and the occasional appearance of Phil Moneyberg. The movie starts with a massively elongated J-cut. Reagan speaks for 47 seconds before he appears on screen, while the camera focuses on some building in an absurdly long establishing shot. The audio overlap in a J-cut usually lasts for 1 to 3 seconds. I am pointing out how badly edited Reagan 24 is because I want to emphasize just how technically incompetent the movie is. It's not just another atrocious biopic, it is an appallingly made atrocious biopic. When the scene does finally cut to Reagan, he and a piece of inspiring music are finishing an inspiring speech. The filmmakers emphasize the inspiring effect the speech has on the audience by playing triumphant music to accompany the applause. In the next scene, Reagan is shot. The movie is only 3 minutes into its runtime, and already it has made a massive mistake. It has broken the most basic rule of setup and payoff. You can't have a payoff this big without a setup. The assassination attempt cannot have any emotional impact this early in the movie because the viewer is not invested in the character yet. Let the audience get to know and like Reagan first, and then show him being shot, so that the viewer cares. We don't care about the Japanese attack on the American fleet at Pearl Harbor in the 2001 movie because it kills thousands of American soldiers. We care about it because it impacts the love triangle between Ben Affleck, Kate Beckinsale, and Josh Hartnett. Build up.
Brave. Stay away. Brave.
And pay off. Spielberg does this perfectly in Lincoln. When Lincoln is shot, you care because he cracks funny jokes, fears for his son's fate in the war, listens to the concerns of the fighting men, and endures punishment for atrocities committed in a past life by staying married to Mary Lincoln. But this guy?
Who the fuck is that guy?
This is the exact same mistake Jobs makes when it opens with the dramatic reveal of next product. What are you talking about, man? What next product? Why should I care? After the opening, there's a corny title sequence which feels like it belongs in a History Channel documentary. The movie is framed as a story being told by a former apparatchik of the USSR, played by Jon Voight, whose job was to profile American political leaders. It's the 90s, a young, potential future leader who is probably Vladimir Putin has come to see Jon Voight and learn from him, so that Russia does not repeat the same mistakes that led to the collapse of the glorious Soviet Union. Jon Voight begins by going back to when the Soviet Union was trying to infiltrate Hollywood by creating a single union that they would have total control over. That chick who played that chick in American Beauty plays Reagan's first wife. She's still gear, man. The dialogue is about as subtle as Bradley Cooper's desire for an Oscar. The filmmakers want us to know that Reagan is surrounded by Hollywood commies and that at some stage he's going to have to pick a side.
At some point you're going to need to pick a side.
Thus far the movie is trash, but watchable trash. I don't mind seeing Reagan take on some vile Hollywood commie scumbags, but just as the movie is getting the viewer invested in the opening plot, it makes another disastrous mistake.
To understand what made this man unique, I needed to understand the boy.
The movie portrays Reagan's childhood. We do learn that from an early age, Reagan learned how to make inspiring speeches accompanied by inspiring music.
Then I will hear from heaven.
Then he reads a book and gets baptized. With that section of the Wikipedia page out of the way, we scroll down a decade to when Reagan was working as a lifeguard, then a college footballer who refuses to cooperate with segregation, then a radio host and an early Hitler detractor, because Hitler is literally Hitler, so it's important for the viewer to know how much Reagan disliked Hitler. That lasts a few seconds, then we scroll past the early life section to Reagan's time making propaganda movies during World War II. Reagan was in his early 30s at this time and looked young for his age, but in Reagan 24, he looks like a bloated 57-year-old man. Bizarrely, an executive in his 40s refers to this near 60-year-old as son. Son. Reagan gets involved in taking on the commies in Hollywood. In a scene that looks like it was written by a particularly enlightened 14-year-old, Reagan literally stands up to commie filth.
You don't want to go to war with us, Reagan.
I will give Reagan some credit. It's a better movie than The Iron Lady. First of all, because it doesn't feel compelled to depict Ronald Reagan's Alzheimer's ravaged dotage, but more importantly, because the viewer can actually understand the political context of the events portrayed on screen. We know that communists are attempting to infiltrate Hollywood and that Reagan is crusading against them. The fact that this awful movie is demonstrably superior to The Iron Lady because it succeeds in the most basic, functional aspects of film, emphasizes just how all-encompassingly shit The Iron Lady is. After defeating the Union of Soviet Socialist Hollywood, Reagan's marriage to that chick from American Beauty deteriorates. The death blow to the marriage is the tragic death of their newborn daughter. For some reason, the scene where Reagan and his wife visit their daughter's grave was filmed in a green screen room. I'm not going to bother with the futile endeavor to find an adjective harsh enough to describe how bad this CGI looks. Suffice to say, it looks like this. This production is so indifferent to viewer immersion that they didn't bother filming this in a real graveyard. The audience should be feeling the emotion of the Reagan's agony here. Instead, they are distracted by this ridiculous cartoon graveyard. In the next scene, an old married couple engage in a bizarre fantasy in which the wife pretends her husband is her son.
How's my son? Marriage, a career. How do you think your boy is?
This is followed by the movie's third or fourth inspiring speech, accompanied by inspiring music.
To listen to that small, soft voice.
Up to this point, Reagan 24 has had something like a raison d'etre, chronicling Reagan's fight against communist subversion of Hollywood. But 30 minutes in, the movie just begins lazily churning out the various greatest hits segments of the man's life, like a legacy band in their 70s, on stage, on autopilot, going through the motions in their 3,648th concert. Not a single fuck left to give, but plenty of money left to make. Reagan meets the love of his life, Nancy, and 5 minutes later they get married. Reagan's acting career enters terminal decline. Reagan's mother dies, and he buries her in yet another hideous CGI graveyard featuring copy-pasted assets. A montage of major Cold War events, a speaking tour, he joins the Republicans and expresses a desire to run for governor of California. The movie vomits out its fifth inspiring speech, accompanied by inspiring music. And of course, a USSR apparatchik is watching the speech on TV, blown away by how inspiring the man, the speech, and the music is. Why is USSR state television broadcasting a speech by an obscure American politician? The inspiring speech communicates that Reagan is putting the commies on notice, that he's not afraid to take them on. We know this because the apparatchik says
He was putting us on notice, that he was not afraid to take us on.
Why is the apparatchik telling Vladimir Putin all of this? Putin wants to know what the USSR did wrong. He's not here to get Ronald Reagan's Wikipedia page read to him. Reagan 24 treats the USSR like a completely passive entity whose policies were formed solely as a response to American foreign policy. So Reagan wins the governorship of California. John Voight relates a famous prophecy foretelling Reagan's ascendancy to the throne of the American empire.
You will dwell at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
And how did the USSR come to know about this prophecy?
One evening, our surveillance picked up one of the strangest exchanges I ever heard.
What surveillance? Did the Soviet Union have a guy hiding in the bushes of Reagan's house listening in? Did the KGB bug Reagan's swimming pool? Reagan runs for president and makes the movie's sixth inspiring speech, accompanied by inspiring music.
Is America as respected throughout the world?
After Reagan's election, the Soviet Politburo sit to watch his inaugural address on TV because the 8 men responsible for running a massive empire have nothing better to do with their time than quake in their boots at the sight of Ronald Reagan. No translator is present, so most of these guys would have no idea what Reagan is saying. Also, rather than go to a room with a TV in it to watch the address, the Politburo brought the TV into their lair so that the viewers would know these are the same bad guys from earlier in the movie. Reagan 24 is perhaps the most America-centric movie I have ever seen. The filmmakers seem to think that the geopolitical world revolves around the White House, watching the president's every move. It doesn't occur to them that most world leaders don't actually give a shit what current American president is doing because these leaders have problems of their own to deal with. During Reagan's presidency, Phil Moneyberg shows up in a cabinet meeting and the following exchange takes place. Mr. President, the budget isn't balanced. We need to increase taxes to 400%. You numbskull, don't you know basic math? Of course not, Mr. President. I'm an idiot, which is why I think we need to increase taxes to 800%. Well, I may not have gone to a fancy college like you, Sonny, but I know a thing or two about economics. So instead of making Americans poor, my plan is to make Americans rich. That's genius, Mr. President. Why didn't I think of that? At this stage, Reagan 24 just becomes a blur of inspiring presidential moments. I could list them off, but instead, I'm going to try to visually represent the effect the greatest hits format has on a viewer. The greatest hits format has an effect on a viewer's engagement similar to cheap vodka. Each segment is like a shot. You can drink the first few and still keep your mind relatively focused. You might even enjoy the first couple of shots, but with each additional shot, you become more nauseated. The taste becomes more disgusting, the drink harder to keep down. By the 8th shot, you are incapable of listening to a conversation. By the 11th shot, you just want to go to sleep. And shortly after your 14th shot, you're in the toilets puking your guts out. Right now, I am almost 1.5 hours into my rewatch of Reagan, and I can't take anymore. My engagement is at 0. My desire to continue watching is considerably below that. The rest of the movie is White House meetings, more inspiring speeches with more inspiring music, more Politburo sitting in their evil lair watching Reagan on TV. I'm sorry, man, I can't take any more of this. If you want to know what happens for the rest of the movie, just read Ronald Reagan's Wikipedia page. One thing I do remember from my first viewing of Reagan 24 is that the movie deals with the Iran-Contra affair by presenting it not as a horrifying war in which Reagan armed terrorists who slaughtered tens of thousands of innocent people, but as a public relations blunder. Reagan did tell a few fibs to the American people in order to arm and fund ruthless warlords who committed atrocities on a vast scale, but he said he was sorry.
Well, the boy's a hero then. Good for you, son. Well done. So it's all's well and back to our brandy, eh?
Fittingly, for one of the tropiest movies ever made, Reagan 24 ends with Ronald Reagan literally riding off into the sunset. I was surprised to learn that the director of Reagan, Sean McNamara, is an extremely experienced filmmaker. He directed 34 films prior to Reagan 24. I didn't recognize any of them, but I discovered that one of his movies is called Legally Blondes, a straight-to-DVD third installment in the Legally Blonde franchise released in 2009. Reagan was a box office disaster. It made $30 million on a $25 million budget. Usually, when there is a massive discrepancy between the audience and critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience are correct and the critics are dutifully shilling the latest current year bollocks from Hollywood for entirely political reasons. The latest season of Doctor Who is a perfect example of this. The critics gave it 92%. Not a single critic who positively reviewed that abominable season of television will ever rewatch a single episode of it. Reagan 24 seems to be a unique example of the opposite happening. The movie has a 98% audience score and an 18% critic score. To put that into context, The Fellowship of the Ring has a 95% audience score. Reagan received 6.1 out of 10 on IMDb from 12,000 audience ratings and 5.6 on Metacritic. The IMDb and Metacritic scores, added to the fact that Reagan 24 is dreadful, leads to the obvious conclusion that Ronald Reagan stands launched an organised campaign to review shill this tritagiography on Rotten Tomatoes, likely as a response to what they felt was unfair treatment from shitlib professional movie critics. I have no doubt that the shitlib critics were biased against Reagan 24, but garbage is still garbage, even if it is proudly waving the American flag. The critics were right. If anything, they were too generous. There is no way this calamity is a near 2 out of 10. Reagan received a well-earned Razzie nomination for Worst Movie, but lost out to Madam Web, which was the incorrect choice. Joker 2 was the worst movie of 2024, and it wasn't close. For details, see my video, Joker Folie à Deux is the worst movie of 2024. According to Google Gemini AI, quote, "There are no announced plans for a sequel to the 2024 movie Reagan. I have spent the past 2.5 hours explaining what a biopic shouldn't do. So now I, the Despot, here bestow a script treatment that demonstrates what a biopic should do. Our subject will be the Beatles. A vast amount of Beatles biopics have been made. They're all terrible. And I don't hold out much hope for the Sam Mendes upcoming Beatles quadrilogy. Elliot Roberts made a great video about Beatles biopics if you want to explore the topic further. So the Despots movie will be the biopic that the Beatles deserve. A day in the life. Instead of some shitty whole life biopic with cheesy dramatizations and bullshit nonsense that never happened, this movie will cover one day in the Beatles' career with the aim of depicting it as accurately as possible and remaining true to the values that the Beatles espoused. Karen iPhone, hit it! We open to the Beatles careening through Rogue City in their tour van. They have just hit a bank and are in a high-speed chase with the cops. During the chase, Pete Best makes an offhand comment, suggesting that Elvis's debut album isn't as great as it's hyped up to be. The Beatles respond to this disgraceful libel in the only way civilized men can. I'm just saying, man, it's a good album, but I think it drags a bit, you know?
Pick him up. Can you fly, Bobby? Clarence, no! Hit it!
After their 1968 Bigger Than Jesus tour around the States, the Beatles head to EMI headquarters in London to convince Phil Moneyberg to greenlight their next project. It's called Abbey Road, Phil. It's gonna be about roads and abbeys and that. It's a load of bollocks. It doesn't make any sense. Sun King, what does that mean? The sun is a solar body made out of gas, not a sovereign territory. I'll never release Abbey Road or any other bloody road. I want hits, not traffic signs. The Beatles respond with uncharacteristic anger to Phil's objections. Now, audiences might be a little surprised when they discover that the Beatles could have a temper at times, so we're going to have All You Need Is Love playing in the background just to keep things chill. Karen iPhone, roll the scene. I'll never release Abbey Road or any other bloody road. I want hits, not traffic signs. Back at the studio, the boys are working on Abbey Road. Now, we want to make sure the audience knows where the narrative is in terms of chronology, so we'll be sure to include a few subtle indicators here and there. Alright, Ringo, hey, what time is it? It's 2:17 p.m, November 8th, 1969. Cheers, lad. What are you working on? A new song. It's really good. Play it for us. While Ringo is working on Bohemian Rhapsody, George gets into an argument with Paul after yet another of Paul's ridiculous demands. I'm just saying, man, I love your guitar part, but if we record it as an electric instrument, we can't record a guitar electronically, Paul. It's impossible. That would require some kind of electric guitar, and they don't exist. Bradley Cooper comes into the studio to harass the Beatles and lobby for his latest movie, Maestro. He's been in character as Leonard Bernstein for 3 years, and doesn't seem to understand that Maestro came out 3 years ago, didn't win any awards, and is no longer eligible for any awards. Well, you see, Oscar, this film I've made, it's called Maestro, and if you could see your way to putting in a good word at the Academy, I really think it would help the film's profile. I'm not a member of any academy, Bradley. I don't know anything about that. And my name's not Oscar, it's John. Oh, yes, of course. I beg your pardon, John. It's just that, well, I've made really a rather good movie here, and, well, you see, Oscar, if you would only watch it, you'd understand its cultural significance. I did watch it. When you invited us to a private advanced screening of 2001: A Space Odyssey, then barricaded the doors of the cinema and screened Maestro instead, and wouldn't let us leave until the film was over. It was dreadful, Bradley. It was bloody dreadful. Oh, I thank you, Oscar. I'm really quite proud of it myself. In many ways, I think of you as my contemporary. You, the great genius songwriter, and me, the visionary auteur director. Well, thank you for your consideration, Oscar. I'll see you at the Oscars. If you want, you can take a photo with me and my Oscar. Bradley, I'm not interested in you. But you can't touch the Oscar, you understand, Oscar? Just look at it. Look, Bradley... Yeah, okay, that's fab, Bradley. Can't wait. Safe home now. Thank you, Oscar. A little later, the Beatles head up to the roof to rubberneck on a hostage incident happening across the road. Steve Jobs has taken a handful of civil servants hostage and is forcing them to listen to him give inspiring speeches.
And in your life, you only get to do so many things. And right now, we've chosen to do this. So let's make it great.
Next, we got our first montage, accompanied by Here Comes the Sun. Karen, iPhone, hit it. George drinks tea and eats a chocolate digestive biscuit. Paul takes a shit and wipes his ass a few times. Ringo goes for a smoke. John browses through a few magazines. George Martin gets up and goes for a piss. Ringo has another smoke. Paul finishes taking a shit and flushes the toilet. John wipes his glasses. George tunes his electric guitar. Ringo walks down the hall on his way to the shop to buy a packet of crisps. A maid brings John a cup of tea and takes his ashtray away. The Beatles mill about the studio discussing their song. Paul insists that they record an electric guitar part. This causes George to have a public crash out. He screams at Paul that electrified guitars simply can't be done, then tells everyone in the band to get fucked, storms off and embarks on a montage of drink and drug-fueled debauchery. And then Paul's ex walks into the studio and informs Paul that she's pregnant. We cut back to Steve Jobs, who is just about finishing his last inspiring speech.
Here's to the crazy ones. The misfits. The rebels.
The Beatles are in the studio when news comes in from the sound booth that they need to bring a TV into the room so they can watch a major geopolitical event unfold. A vast army of predatory men from the 2022 movie Blonde have invaded the Isle of Wight. They are ravaging their way through the island, jeering maliciously and wolf whistling at every woman they can get near. Margaret Thatcher orders a task force to set out to liberate the island, but Brian May asserts that the military need to get experimental. He advises that the army attach a giant cinema screen to the side of an aircraft carrier, then use a drone to project nude photos of Marilyn Monroe onto it and sail it close to the coast of the Isle of Wight. Phil Moneyberg opposes all resistance to the invaders. I'm telling you, what we need to do is surrender to the perverts and agree to their demand to ban women from wearing clothes. Maggie, what do you think? I will stand for justice, and for justice I will stand. Let it be known and make no mistake that as long as I am Prime Minister, justice will be stood for. The Navy go with Brian May's plan. They sail the carrier over to the Isle of Wight, and as soon as the army of predatory men see the slideshow of nudes, they run into the ocean to get closer to it and all drown. Thatcher is hailed as Britain's saviour. Unfortunately, there is no time to rejoice. The Academy have refused to nominate Maestro for awards for the third year running. In protest, Bradley Cooper has morphed into a giant monster and has launched a full-scale assault on central London.
The garden work. Polly Vega swears that she's on the top of the stairs every morning when she comes down to do the laundry, making sure she's separating the whites and the darks. And our children are very jealous because they've never seen her.
And only the Beatles can stop him. George returns to the band hungover and apologises to everyone, and with the band reunited, they suit up and engage in a cinematic battle with the creature Bradley Cooper. The fight rages through London, and when George, Paul and Ringo have been put out of action, all seems lost, but then John, aided by Yoko Ono, unleashes one final gambit for victory.
And I love music. I love music so much. It keeps me glued to life even when I'm most depressed.
The Beatles are readying themselves for a victory concert at Hyde Park when Ringo gathers the band around him to tell them something important.
This is a serious message. Peace and love. Peace and love. I want to tell you. Anyway, peace and love. Peace and love.
The Beatles go on stage and perform long enough to allow the theatre audience to forget the movie they just watched.
Yeah, but I've been through this one like for about 6 months. Attracts me like a pomegranate.
I just wanna know why every time I come around, motherfuckers think it's funny looking at me up and down. I don't really know you, you don't really know the crew. Stop acting like it's funny, now shit you gonna do. Look at you, crew not hard. Motherfuckers don't know that the kid had bars, check ID, flow, police him down. You always acting funny till police come around. You got a new car, but you leasing it now. I got a big dog on a leash, I'm releasing them now. You know police at a pound, I'm a beast in the hound. No crew loud, we ain't keeping it down, but we slowing it down. She got crew love, cause she holding us down, holding us down. Got young ins pouring out, they hosters now. Not shopping and holders now. What? All ball main, all this designer, Gucci and Prada. Spending a lot on weed and anything I need, I'm trying to smoke.
What was that?